Good evening. It is 6:30 on Tuesday, February 25th, and I am calling this Bastrop regular City Council meeting to order. We are going to start with our Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Mitchell Clardy and Jack Reynolds from Mina Elementary Harry Potter Book Club. And they're going to come up here and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Let's give them a hand. Thank you, gentlemen. Everyone remain standing. We will have an invocation by Phil Woods, police chaplain.
Father, we want to thank you for a beautiful day. And Lord, as we look around and we know spring's just around the corner and new growth and new life, we just thank you for the growth and the life that you've given to Bastrop. And tonight as the City Council meets and goes through the agenda that's before them, we just pray for wisdom and the direction of your Holy Spirit. And Lord, tonight we just want to lift up all of our employees throughout the city and thank you for the ways in which they serve us in such a wonderful ways. Lord, those that could put themselves in harm's way, fire department, police department, we just ask their protection tonight. And Lord, I pray that we could be your hands extended to those within our community that may be hurting tonight, and we may not be aware, but Lord, help us to see and reach out. We just pray these things tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Everyone be seated. So I'm going to move the executive session to later in the meeting, just after before the consent agenda, which is item 10. And so we are going to go ahead and get started with presentations, which is item 6. So we'll start with the Mayor Pro Tem's report, which I actually need a couple seconds to pull it up. Let's see. There it is. Okay, great. So we have had a busy couple of weeks, as is typical and normal for us. On the 15th, we all got together and had a series of wastewater groundbreakings, Agnes Street groundbreaking, and a groundbreaking at the Columbarium project next to the wastewater plant was a ribbon cutting because they moved in the next day, so not a groundbreaking. And all of us were there on council, and it was a good day of progress for the city of Bastrop. And so thank you to really everyone out there, because your tax dollars make that possible, and thank you to our city manager. It's her execution that pulls it off. We've had 2 special P&Z commission meetings, special meetings to discuss continued alterations to the B3 building code. Those are things that have been long in discussion over many, many years. We're probably going to make 80 changes over the course of now and the next 2 or 3 years or so as we fine-tune the things that are necessary from what was given to us originally. On Friday the 21st, the city held not the city of Bastrop, but many people in our community held a celebration of life for Rose Clemens. And Councilperson Lee and Meyer and Plunkett were there, and I was able to present a beautiful plaque to the family. And it was a very touching and moving service, and she was definitely very well loved. On the 22nd, I went to a presentation honoring A.Z. Taylor Morton, who was the first and only black treasurer of the United States, and we held that at the Hampton Inn. I read a city proclamation there with Councilperson Lee and Councilperson Meyer, and she served under President Carter, and she signed all of the money. So if you have some dollar bills or anything else in any other denomination from that time frame, it'll have her signature on it. So that's all I have. We will now move on to council member reports. Council member Lee, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening, Bastrop. So I wanted to congratulate Dory, who hosted the Business Roundtable Monday morning. I watched it online. It was very informative. Looked like there was a lot of people in the audience asking a lot of good questions, got a lot of good feedback. So I just wanted to kind of give her a shout out for that because she hosted that very, very well. And I'm glad that EDC now has some information they can move forward with to help our business owners. I did to attend the A.Z. Morton celebration. So I want to thank her in postmortem for her contributions as a teacher, a politician. She was born in Bastrop County in our historic St. John's Colony. And I was honored to meet her family. Some of her family members were there and friends from when she attended Houston Tillotson. A lot of good stories there that reminded me of my days at Prairie View A&M. And just very thankful for her legacy because, you know, she achieved a lot in a time of inequality. And to be able to get to where she was able to get to was an honor. So I'm glad I attended that. And thank you for the Hampton and Kerr Community Center and the African American Cultural Group for putting that all together. I then, of course, attended my dear friend Rose's funeral. I'd like to thank staff for pulling that proclamation together and purchasing that beautiful cross. The family was very, very touched by the efforts of the city, so I appreciate you guys getting that together. Thank you.
Councilperson Foster.
Hi, good evening, y'all. I appreciate hearing about the celebration of life and the celebration of love. I got to go to my friend's wedding this weekend. LaDonna and Rosa got married this weekend. And then celebration of the weather changing. Praise God. The birds were singing. The master gardeners are having their spring plant sale on Saturday, March 15th from 9 to 1 at Mayfest in the show barn. So that's all I've got. Celebration of life, celebration of love, and celebration of spring coming. Thank you.
Councilperson Plunkett.
I'll yield back my time.
Councilperson Meyer.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a few quick things. Because last week it's hard to believe that it was 20 degrees, I really want to thank once again the Calvary Episcopal Church and Hands in the Streets Ministry for providing warm shelter overnight for those who needed warmth, the homeless, people that had nowhere to go. So without our partners in the community doing this, we wouldn't be served. So we are all partners, and it's very important to recognize those who do this. Also, just a quick shout out to the Bastrop Education Foundation. They had their sportsman banquet this past weekend, and Josh Corey told me there were over 700 people in attendance at the convention center, which means they were packed, which is always great because that means a lot of instructional grants will be granted for our independent school districts. So that's always wonderful. And my last thanks goes out to our wastewater plant and all the people who work there and Sylvia because they figured out the problems. We've had some problems going on and it took our great people and our employees to figure this out. So thank you, Curtis. Thanks to everyone who figured out the problems and got us on track.
Move on to item 6C, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We are in the middle of what I like to call silly season, which is election season. For those of you who don't know, city managers go through an election every single year, and this is about my 23rd silly season. So that's what I lovingly refer to it. And during this season, we have candidates running, we have folks who say they're going to run, and the rumor mill abounds. So the question that was in your packet was, Councilmember Lee will not be running for her seat. As we know, she'll be running in place 5 against the incumbent, John Kirkland. So the question arose, Councilmember Lee is supposed to resign her seat, and we shouldn't see her on the dais anymore. So I wanted to clear that up for everybody in the audience. It was in your packet. No, she doesn't leave her seat. She stays until the election. She did resign her specific seat, but she stays in her seat until the election. And what's in your packet is the specific language to the charter. So get that one out of there. Next, this is who we have running for office. The mayor's race, those applications are due on Monday, and yes, it is a city holiday, and yes, city staff will be here to accept those applications. For city council, we have Perry Lowe and Cecilia Cerna, and place 5, John Kirkland and Cheryl Lee. As of 2/25, we have 2 eligible applicants, and we had 1 ineligible submission who resided in Cedar Creek. That is Willie De La Rosa and Ishmael Harris. Mr. Harris vacated his planning and zoning seat because, as you're aware, last year we passed the resign to run for some of our boards and commissions. That resignation is immediate. So, position update. We held finance director interviews. We extended an offer. There's a potential start date for March the 17th. The person that is coming has experience with the city of San Antonio and the city of Corpus Christi. So we are excited and hope that all of that turns out well. We seem to have a problem with background and drug tests these days with all of our applicants, but that's a different story. That's a different story. Director of Engineering, we did fill the position with Tiger Davis. Yes, that's his real name, from the city of Austin. Our city secretary position remains vacant, although we do have some folks who are interested in the position, and I believe we're going to have to revisit the salary at some point. We do have a vacancy for senior planner. During the Mardi Gras celebration, we actually have some AICP planners who live among us who are actually employees for the city of Austin who are anxious to get back to Bastrop and not have to make that ugly commute. So we've got some interviews scheduled, 2 very qualified applicants. Rideshare. So I met with Dave Marsh with CARTS, and we are going to potentially try to look at some proof of concept, some expansion of the CARTS program that will still require an Uber rideshare. But Norma Mercado informed me that they have a grant, so we may be able to co-share a pilot program with the Uber rideshare, and we'll continue working with Dave. CARTS has an expansion that's planned in their current footprint, and so there may be some sharing of drainage into the city's right-of-way that would allow them to expand some of their electric footprint and expand some of their buses. Councilmember Lee, you asked for a galvanized pipe update with the folks who got notice. So there were 128 properties in the city that received notice that have galvanized pipe from their connection, the city's connection at the meter, to their home. And so this is an EPA rule. We're required to do that test. The EPA requires replacement in 10 years, so by 2034. The difficulty in getting people to go expend that money is when administrations change, EPA rules change. So the city is a stopgap measure. We provided filters for folks, and the potential is that lead may leak out of those galvanized pipes. Those pipes have been in place for some time. We haven't had anybody who said, my water tested positive for lead. So that's a stopgap measure. We're not allowed to go onto the private person's side of the property, so for us to go and repair those galvanized pipes would be a no-no. But if they're low income or something like that, we could partner with one of our partner agencies to get that done. Quickly, so you saw on social media there's a water line repair. Folks didn't look at the map. There's this craziness that folks are going to be out of water on the 27th of February. That's in the industrial park. It's not anywhere else. And measles, this is a super critical. We had a potential scare this week about a potential case in Bastrop County. Thankfully, it turned out negative. But really, please put precautions in place. Your family, wash your hands. If you're sick, feel sick, don't go out in public. We don't want this to be another COVID, and be vigilant and ensure your vaccinations are up to date. What the city and the county would be required to do if we had a confirmed case is very similar to COVID in terms of heat maps, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be very labor intensive if we get to that point. And if you've been watching the media, San Marcos has a case, and somewhere else in Hays County, I believe, has a case. So that's my report.
Councilperson Lee?
Thank you. So I do have some questions. So on the election update regarding the question regarding me, did that come to the city attorney, or where was that question posed? Or- And it was ran through legal? Because I thought we had agreed, if anything, if a question is posed and it goes to legal, then all of council, because I didn't even realize that was going on until I read the packet this morning, or yesterday. So we didn't get an email from legal saying, here are the rules.
No, but you're approving that policy tonight.
I know,
Yeah.
but we agreed that if there was a question posed to legal, that all of council would get a response, so, because I was like shocked that it was even a question. So can we make sure that that
Sure.
happens going forward?
Sure.
Thank you. And then on the pipes. So on the packet, it says TCEQ requires property owners to get that done. Did I hear you say 2034?
It's an EPA rule. It's a 10-year.
Do we have an estimated cost of what something like that? I know people's houses setbacks are different, but
Yeah, I
is
I
it
don't
over,
know.
is it like thousands of dollars, a
Yes.
couple of hundred?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And that's one of the reasons why we did the stopgap measure of the filter, because there are many cities, many places that have these kinds of pipes, and, you know, unless you're super vigilant about testing for lead in your water, just that rule. So I would hate for a resident who doesn't have the means to go get into debt or some other financial pickle to try to get this done when the rule may change.
Well, and then, so these pipes, are they older? Are they just pipes that were used back in the day?
Yes.
And we all have them, and the pipes now are
Yes.
newer and
Yes,
they don't
now we
face
go
this
to
problem?
PVC type pipe.
And does boiling water, because I don't drink tap water, I drink bottled water, but I do cook with tap water. So does boiling or cooking with water, could you be impacted by it?
Boiling water does not remove the lead. The lead has to be.
I'm getting a letter, but I certainly don't have a filter. So how do do
So
residents just need to call and see if they're in the area?
So we have a map. We have a map that was provided with the letter. We can make sure that we post that online and share the link so that everybody knows they can just go.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because I think probably a lot of people don't even realize they're at risk with that. Couple of more questions, or maybe no, I don't have any more questions, but I would like to make another request
Sure.
for a future discussion item. So the Ruby Mae Johnson family reached out to me, and I believe that some of the family members are here because they want to look at renaming Spring Street from 95 back up to CP Johnson Lane to Ruby Way. So I told them that I would push that off to you to help them figure out the process for that. CP Johnson Lane was renamed, I believe, under Mayor Ken Kesslis. And I did look up some of the process, but you're better to talk to get that renamed. But I did want to point out that in looking at the street for them, when you look at our CAD map and Google, that street that was named CP Johnson Lane, it still shows up as Pitts. But the sign says CP Johnson Lane. So I don't know how you fix Google, but we can fix our CAD so that someone can locate that street.
So street renaming gets really tricky when there's more than one resident on the street, and that's because you have to change driver's license and insurance and mortgage documents, and it gets super tricky. And that may be why the sign says that, but the official is still Pitts. I don't know, but I
Yeah,
will.
and I tried to find the resolution that changed it to C.P. Johnson Lane, and I couldn't. So they're here, hoping that we can help them change that to Ruby Way.
We'll move on to item 6D, proclamation in memory of Rose LaCynthia Clemens.
And you're wanting me to read that? Okay. This proclamation was read at Rose's funeral. Rose, again, passed away on February the 10th. She was very well known in our community, and all between Smithville, Bastrop, Elgin, and out of the state of Texas. She was very, very well known, very well loved. The ceremony was very, very beautiful. And again, I want to thank the staff for putting this proclamation together and presenting it to the family. They were really, really touched by it. Whereas the City of Bastrop joins family, friends, and the community in the mourning the loss of Rose LaCynthia Clemens, who passed away on February 10, 2025, and whereas Rose was born on October 29, 1960, to the late Aaron Taylor and Lois Sims Baker, and was raised in a loving and faith-filled home by her mother and stepfather, Elder C.J. Baker, and whereas she dedicated her life to faith, family, and service, being baptized at an early age, actively participating in the church choir, and serving on the usher board at Hopewell Primitive Baptist Church. And whereas Rose was a proud graduate of Bastrop High School, class of 1979, where she excelled in sports and class organizations, and later pursued higher education at Durham School of Businesses. And whereas she was a devoted mother to her children, Crystal, Victoria, and Aaron, and a beloved grandmother, great-grandmother, sister, aunt, and friend, who shared her warmth, wisdom, and love with all who knew her. And whereas Rose dedicated her professional life to education and community service, working as a teacher in the school district, and later contributed to the community through her employment at HEB. And whereas she made a lasting impact on the City of Bastrop through her involvement in the Juneteenth Committee, the African American History Museum, and the Bastrop High School class of 1979 Reunion Committee, enriching the cultural and historical fabric of the community. And whereas Rose will be remembered for her selflessness, creativity, and kindness, leaving behind a legacy of love, service, and dedication to her faith, family, and community. And whereas, though her passing leaves a void in our hearts, her spirit is of generosity, laughter, and unwavering support for her community will forever inspire those who had the privilege of knowing her. Now, therefore, I, John Kirkland, Acting Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Bastrop, Texas, do hereby honor and celebrate the life and legacy of Rose LaCynthia Clemens, recognizing her many contributions to our community and expressing our deepest condolences to her family and loved ones. Furthermore, I do hereby proclaim October 29th, 2025, what would have been her 65th birthday, as Rose LaCynthia Clemens Day in the City of Bastrop. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of Bastrop, Texas, to be affixed this 21st day of February 2025. Signed by Victoria Penzick, Assistant City Secretary, and John Kirkland, Acting Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson Lee. I can say that Rose was well loved. I raised a prayer request for her at the church where I attend on Shiloh Road, and multiple families spoke up that knew her from their jobs at HEB, and they very well loved in the community. We're going to move on to item 7A, under work sessions and briefings, presentation of annual work plan by City of Bastrop boards and commissions pursuant to Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, General Provisions, Article 104, Boards, Committees, and Commissions, Section 10402, Procedures.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start off by saying some of these did not correspond with our meeting date, so there are several who are still in the process of adopting their work plan. Mostly those things in development services, because obviously planning and zoning has been a bit busy with other things. And then also the Parks and Recreation Board still needs to finalize, as does Cultural Arts. So the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation is under my purview, and the board accepted as their work plan / strategic plan this year 4 pillars. The first pillar was the industrial park, to expand businesses at the park. Such expansion includes L&S Electric, who is a Korean electric component provider, and they'll be providing major parts to the Samsung plant in Taylor. Expansion is important that Governor Abbott will be paying a visit at their ribbon cutting on April 14th, and the council should have received those applications. We're also the site for the regional roundtable that the governor selects several cities throughout the state, and we are a selected city. Pillar 2 is workforce development, and that is to partner with industry and available resources. And one of those was the business roundtable that we held on Monday. We had over 30 people in attendance, and a lot of them were very, very new faces. And the purpose is to, 1, understand what business needs, but 2, to connect the resources available. So many people in the room and so many people who weren't aware of what each other does. So it was a good connecting point. The third is the business attraction, retention, and expansion. That's Dory's new position. She's taken off like a rocket and is really rocking and rolling. And her job is to land bank, and not necessarily us own the land, but to make those connections with property owners. So when businesses do come to Bastrop, we have an available resource of what's out there and what could potentially be connected. And then pillar number 4, and you'll hear this throughout all of our boards and commissions, is that of partnerships. And I'm talking this year a lot about transformational partnerships. Where we overlap, where we are duplicating efforts, how do we best exercise that and stretch that dollar better? And with the EDC, it is establishing and then also sustaining our partnerships with not just industry, the county, the school, but also those non-government organizations, the nonprofits, the workforce solutions, career tracks, all of those things that provide services within the EDC realm that the EDC just can't do alone. We're not teachers, we're not instructors, we're not some of those providers, and it is to connect resources. The next board is the Bridging Bastrop Board. That board has 3 major goals, and they all center around engagement, and again, connecting people with resources. And our biggest barrier thus far has been distributing information as to how people receive that. A lot of people receive it social media, but we have many folks who, older folks in our community, who don't have access to those types of things. So we continue to struggle. We partner with the senior center and those kinds of things on how to get information out. And then again, working collaboratively, making sure that we are partners at the seat at the job fair, making sure that we are partners when the BEDC has an offering of a job or there's industry coming. What are those needs that our community has? Right now, they are needing some resources to continue to be successful, and that is a web page designer and sustaining the media site. We do get some hits on that site, but I think it could be a little bit more robust. And then some budget to produce written material. Again, pamphlets, handouts. We've been doing surveys. I feel like we killed it the first year on surveying people on what they wanted to see, how they heard it, where'd they hear about it, and if they even knew that this board had changed names and what it does. So that's the Bridging Bastrop Board. And Fairview Cemetery, I don't know if, Laura, you want to go through that, or Mayor Pro Tem, would you like me to go through the remaining few?
Yeah, go through them.
Okay. Fairview Cemetery, sorry about that font, y'all. Fairview Cemetery, it is, as you spoke earlier today about the groundbreaking that we had last Saturday, the columbarium is actually going up today. It started. We had a little bit of a snafu with the sign being hit as the contractor was leaving, so you won't see a Fairview Cemetery sign for a day or so. But continue to make recommendations about policies and procedures. And you have an item on your agenda today that talks about the fees that we'll be assessing. Again, that's a loan from the general fund to the cemetery that we believe is robust enough to pay it back. But, so the cemetery's been working on that. And then also formulating goals. It seems like the faster we grow, the faster the need for the cemetery grows. And so we did acquire some land around the cemetery and just making sure that that's adequately planned. The next one is Hunter's Crossing. If I could keep this board from spending money, I'd be super happy. Evaluating the assessments. Council did at the last year say this pit is on its last legs and we need to make sure that this goes away. So we are working super diligently with the board to make sure that we only spend what's absolutely necessary. Like we're not spending for fences and sidewalks. There's a drainage issue that we have to address that will probably need to be addressed by this pit and also with the city. Essentially to help give relief to the property owners. Main Street, this has been a super busy board. Again, advocating, Michaela, Bonnie, EDC have now, and Visit Bastrop have now been lumped under an umbrella. Those are the 4 folks who have a lot of redundant effort, especially as it relates to education and resources for small businesses and residents. And so we are looking, we had a visit by the Texas Historic Commission on the Main Street accreditation and what is needed. I am going to stand on this very table at some point in the future and tell you that Main Street needs its own historic designation. It's very difficult to lump everybody in the same place when a business owner downtown has a much different need than the historic house Jeff Connor lives in. Just sorry, Jeff Connor, didn't mean to call you out, but very different windows and doors and signs and those kinds of things, and it makes it very difficult for a business owner downtown to get through that. And, you know, we have a goal of having a thriving downtown. Well, when we make the knothole that big that they have to fall through, it gets difficult. And so I think we need to set a set of standards that works with that and creates a more cohesive sense of place. So we've got a lot of, I don't want to say mishmash because that's what makes Bastrop so unique, but we've got to make things work in the cog that they're in, and this one seems to be struggling, especially as it relates to signs. Michaela's still trying to work on people staying open later and opening on Mondays, so if y'all know downtown business owners, please encourage that also.
I can say Monday's always a good day for me because I'm always open.
I know, sir, because you're open. The library board, this is a this is a board that like stays on track, and I'm going to attribute that to Bonnie, like keeping them on track. But they have a policy, they have a goal to review policies. They do that. They're super good about doing that and advocate and educate the public about the library, volunteer opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. I brought her in under the EDC fold because the library is such an important resource for small businesses, especially when they don't have access to a printer, they don't have access to a computer, they don't have access to internet. She is a missing piece that is a foundational piece on how we can help those businesses and residents succeed. And then continue to meet industry standards and help her staff stay trained and well-informed. There you go.
Councilperson Lee, do you have a question? Oh, my apologies. I thought you just turned that on. Okay, council, any questions for the city manager? Thank you very much, Madam City Manager. So we'll move on to item 7B, discuss and recommend a proposed process for city council members to request training opportunities.
This is a super simple. We went back and forth on what we should force you to do, what you have to do, what you want to do. I didn't want to go down that path. I said every council member should get a $2,500 allotment. In your first year, you're going to be required to attend your duly elected training. That's just kind of a given. That lays the rules of the road. But some of you like to attend the economic development. Some of you like to attend others. That is up to your personal purview, what you feel is important, so long as it is a TML affiliate or TML endorsed training, totally fine. But I want the allotment to include ticket to events too. So, if you want to go, you can go. It's just, some of those, like the Sportsman's Banquet, love to support them. That's just too expensive of a table for us to purchase. So FYI out there world, maybe somebody wants to sponsor a table for city council. But anyway.
Councilperson Meyer.
Thank you. So just to, for information's sake, and I realize the city of Elgin has more council members than we do, but they are allotted $1,200 a year. They went down from $1,333 last year. So just in comparison, that's more than twice of what Elgin does, and Elgin's a huge growing city also. So I think $2,500 is more than fair. Thank you for the number. And also, that doesn't mean we can't attend other things, everyone. We just have to pay for it with our own money and not the people's money. And that's kind of important, too. So I think that's a very a great number, and it's responsible spending of public funds.
Councilperson Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. So I actually disagree. $2,500, the average cost for the TML conference, based on last year's spending, and I know the hotels vary, is $1,600. I don't think not enough appreciation is given to the education that TML provides. Before, this has been something that was going on way before I got on council. People were going to TML, and I think we had a former council member who was TML president at one time. They do the legislative webinars, which are super, super important, and those run about $45 for the on-demand ones. They do some in-person ones. I think instead of looking at it as $2,500, I would rather be educated than go to a gala or a luncheon, quite honestly. There's a lot to learn. As a new council member, as a sitting council member, laws are forever changing that we're not aware of and maybe probably don't even understand. They have some really good EDC trainings that I think our EDC board could go to. They have some really good trainings, our planning and zoning, for our planning and zoning commissioners who are a lot of times brand new and don't understand, really the realm of planning. It takes a good full year before you grasp what you're doing on council and planning and zoning. So I would like council to consider a different approach to this, because the $2,500, it's not enough to take. It's not enough for one conference. You got your TML annual conference, which is very important to go to. We have our small town conference. We're a small town. That's always very informative. And then the mid-year conference. I would ask that the city continue to support councils for those, at least the three major ones, and then the $2,500 would be for me for anything outside of that. In the financials that you gave us, there was all kinds of cookie purchases, Schlotzskys, none of that has to do with anything with training. So I don't feel like we got the actual training budget, because we're throwing in tickets to galas. None of that has anything to do with training. I'm not really sure why it was included in our budget for training. I'd actually like, before we make a decision, to separate that out, because it shouldn't have been. There was a purchase for a former city council member to go to the TML conference. Where is that in the policy that we pay for hotels for former city council members? There was a $345 charge for Mardi Gras for a commissioner to go do whatever, but $345 that's not part of training. So I'd like to see all of that extracted out, and then for council to consider the mid-year conference, small town conference, annual conference, supported by the city, and then we get our $2,500 for whatever little other extra meetings or webinars that we want to take. Because I think it's super, super important that we utilize that resource, because why are we paying a membership if we're not going to utilize the resource? It's there for us to learn and be able to do our jobs better.
Councilperson Meyer, you,
Yes, just one more. So kind of to solve that problem, and I brought it up at our last discussion on this, is we can all share information. We don't all have to go to the same event. So if we decided who wants to go where, we can bring back the information and share it. So we pay for it, but we all don't have to have redundancy of the payment. So I think sharing would be a great opportunity for us to save on money and also be able to benefit from all of the training experience. Because I have a business and money is money, and that's the way I look at things, separating things out and we're going to give money for this and this, it all comes down to the dollar bill. And it all comes down to how much we're spending, period. So I just say, give us a number. I think the $2,500 is more than enough. Let's be efficient with the money. Let's share our training and make good use of the $2,500.
Councilperson Foster.
Thank you. I think $2,500 per council member is a bit low as well. Just for reference, Elgin has 8 council members and the mayor, so they're spread over a little bit. Their math is a little bit different. I would like to see a breakdown as well. Like, I don't consider like the gala tables part of training and travel. I personally am not interested in per diem or mileage or anything like that. I loved training. I highly value training. And so to collapse the budgets of like training and then like galas, I know it's important, but I would like to see us separate those two and code those differently, because I hope as a council that we do lots of training and see what that breakdown is, because I'm not exactly sure what that breakdown is now, but I would like those broken up before we look at policy language. But I think 2,500 is a bit low. If we're looking at just just training, then maybe 2,500 and taking all the, but I'm thinking like at least 3,000 for training and then separating the networking. I don't know how would that be coded?
So
The
some of
galas
what
and sponsorships and stuff.
Some of what you saw in the budget as it relates to the Mardi Gras, that was coded incorrectly, and there was an adjusting entry, and that went to Kathy Danielson and the hotel. So the sandwiches and things, it's when you guys are here and we're doing training or workshops or something like that. You don't have a separate quote-unquote food budget. Council has one bucket. That's kind of how it's been. The 25, so Elgin has 9 times 1,300 is 11,700. And so you guys, 2,500 among you 5 is 12,500, not including the potential 6th person, which would be $15,000 budget. If we take your approach and say we're just going to pay for the training and the registration, but we won't pay for mileage or per diem, that's a little bit, because you guys, for the mid-year
Can we
conference.
choose that or not? I would rather like carpool and pay the own mileage. Like, it's just
Yeah.
not important to me. It was offered to me at the last ones, and I
Yes.
took it because it was a check given to me, but it's not
Yep.
important to me. The
Yep.
training is important to me.
And so for the mid-year conference, there was a hotel offering, and we explained that when city staff has to travel to Austin, we don't stay at a hotel. We don't stay at a hotel even if we're traveling to San Marcos. And for all intents and purposes, a very pregnant person wasn't going to be allowed to stay at a hotel. So from that perspective, if you guys want, we do have a city vehicle that's called administration that would be available for you guys to carpool with if that's going to be an issue. But I'll continue to look. I think the issue with TML is, number one, the hotel is very expensive, but we don't have to stay at the member hotel. We could stay at a different hotel. Or we don't have to go all 6 days or all however many extra days because you're part of an affiliate membership also. You don't have to go all of the days. As staff, we're going to look at staggering our days, and that's just because the workload is so heavy. We don't have the luxury of being gone that long. So I think there's a combination of things we can do. So your suggestion is to up it to 3,000?
It wasn't a very researched number. I really want to see
Okay.
the teased apart line item budget first.
Okay.
Yeah, just to see what we're tracking now for just training and not galas and cookies, because I don't need cookies. I don't eat cookies.
Okay, so you want a more clarified breakout with,
Please, I think that would be helpful.
okay, by council member? Or just a lump sum number?
What do y'all think? Training, decorations, gala, what do you think?
I don't think the cookies and stuff should be in there at all. I'd just like to know, what did we spend, I think you gave us 5 years? 5 years just on training. Take out all the extra stuff, but just what did we spend on training as council members? To Carrie's point, I'll pay for my own gas, and for the per diem, I never took the per diem. The first time I used per diem was Irma kind of forced us to use per diem. I had never even heard of per diem, but she included it when we went to Houston, and then I was told later, yeah, you're supposed to get a per diem. I had never asked for a per diem, and actually had to make me take the gas. But I pay for my own gas. I like driving my own car. I don't have a problem with that. But the hotel registration, because not everybody, has, a restaurant. Sorry, Kevin. I don't have money that I can just write out a check, but I do want the training. So for me, and my understanding is for councils in the past, just the hotel and registration, and the gas was thrown in there, but it's not something that I needed. So yeah, if you could take that out, and then again, figure out also what did we spend collectively on the conferences, I would say the Dallas one and the Houston one, because they're two different, both of them were very expensive hotels. I think there was one in San Antonio that was probably cheaper than what we would have paid. So I think that would be good too, to see on average. And to your point, we don't have to go every single night of it either. But were you trying to say earlier that that the city has to pay for gas? Because when she first brought it up, you were like hesitant.
Going through the, right, we go follow the government tables. It's standard that we pay per diem, it's standard that we pay mileage, and it's standard that we pay the hotel and the registration. Those are the 4 components that are just standard for employees. Council can create its own policy. If council chooses not to reimburse itself for per diem and mileage, that's fine, and council makes a decision that the only thing they want to pay for is the hotel and registration. That's totally council's prerogative. I think that would stretch the dollars because we're at about, 74 cents a mile on reimbursement. And so it adds up pretty quickly, even just going to Houston and back. That adds, several $100s to a travel. But I'll bring that back, and then we can make further determination.
Councilperson Plunkett.
I mean, to me, this is it's a good exercise in what we're, as a group, supposed to be doing, which is managing a budget. This is a tiny little budget. We should be able to individually manage our own budget. If you say, 2,500 seems like plenty to me, I don't know, because we don't get reports that say, how much we've spent, and I would appreciate that. I think this will be a good opportunity, I think, for us as a council, and some people are gonna get more or be able to, get more out of an event with the community where they can, let the citizens know in a larger environment, what's going on, and find out more about what's going on with, with the galas and stuff like that. If they determine that that's a better use of their budget, then that's fine. Let that council member choose that. I think the maximum flexibility for each council member would be to just give it a number and let each member, and of course, we'd need reporting that would let us know what we spent. And that makes total sense to me. And if a per diem's not important to you, then don't turn it in. If it's if mileage isn't important, then don't turn it in. When you, I think I've carpooled with one member at least, if not 2, on almost every trip, past Austin that we've been to. So that's just a natural, it's just saving money for the city. So, and that was, to me, that's the way to manage it.
Councilperson Meyer.
Thank you. And just to kind of support you in that, Kevin, because that's why I wanted to make my comment. No matter how much we have spent, right, in the past, or how much anybody else has spent in all the years, we need to be responsible. So no matter what that number is, let's come up with a very responsible number. Just because we have spent, I don't know, I'm going to throw a number out there, $7,000 a council person, does that mean we should do that? No. We should be responsible, fiscally responsible. That's what we're supposed to be to y'all. So I go along with Kevin's thought. Whatever the number is, however you want to spend, you've got so much in your wallet. If you want to do it all on going to banquets and whatever, do it on that. If you want to do it on training, do it on that. But we have to be responsible, and we have to have a responsible number. No matter what the numbers say that we have spent in the past, a budget is to determine how much we will move forward being responsible with the money. So I like the way you're thinking, Kevin, on that one.
So I also like the idea of having a budget, a number that we have reporting on so that we know where we are and that we allocate our choices as council members on how we're going to get training and so on. And I would include even the tables and the galas and the dinners and things that's used for us as well. I mean, I think I'm fine with 2,500. You know, half of that'll be the hotel for TML and the registration, and then the rest will be 1,200 for other things throughout the year. I think that's pretty reasonable in my mind. If seems like, is there a motion on the table for us to direct the city manager in what to do with this?
This is a work session. There's no,
We can,
sure,
yes, but there's not consensus.
correct.
Okay, motion dies to lack of a
When you say
motion.
consensus, are you,
So what-
John, or Mayor Pro Tem, I think that there is consensus in asking her to go back and clarify what has been spent on training and,
Maybe just go back 1 year, just to get some action.
what's been spent on training, so, because I'd like to see a comparison. I still don't think 2,500 is enough. When you look at the cost of the conferences, the 3 main conferences, not all the workshops, but the 3 main conferences. I'd like to get a cost of what those 3 main conferences have cost us in the past to determine if the $2,500 would be enough to cover at least the 3 main conferences.
I have a motion. I'd like to make a motion to allot each council member $2,500 for travel and training, with the conditions as stated, so long as TML or TML affiliate newly elected training in the first year is a must. TML annual is an option. Allotment includes tickets to events or tables at an event.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
But that motion is to direct the city manager to bring
Direct the
it back.
city manager to.
Question.
Yes.
So what about the other extra expenses that were added in there for like formal city council members and those things? Are we putting language in there for that, or how did that even happen?
So the former council member that Councilmember Lee is referring to is Doc Jackson. Doc Jackson sits on the TML board. It's important for the city to have representation on the TML board. There was an email and conversation with prior legal counsel on an amount that the city can spend for TML representation. We placed a limit of $1,000 on that representation. And so that allotment is typically coming out of the city manager's org, out of my own training budget. If it was coded to the city council, I will have that adjusting entry made. But that $1,000, and it truly is for the city to have representation at a statewide level for a pretty important board.
Yeah, it was included on that's why I'd like to see that all of that separated out.
And in the whole scheme of things, it really is council. I mean, he was a prior council member, but I got it.
Councilperson Plunkett?
Yeah, and none of that would go against any individual council member's budget anyway. I'm sure when they get sandwiches for the back or whatever, that probably wouldn't, I doubt you're going to fool around and
I won't
divide
charge
that
you
up
per
6 times
sandwich.
and
I
all
will
that
not
kind of
charge you
stuff.
per sandwich.
But if you do,
promise.
it's fine.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to direct the city manager to pull together a process to bring back to us that would involve the items that are listed up on the screen with a $2,500 allotment and the other things that were mentioned by Councilperson Meyer. So
I will also bring a clear breakout. 1 year, 5 year. Does it matter?
I
1
don't
year?
need, yeah, I would even say 2 to 3. I don't need 5. I would say just in 3 years, yeah.
Okay, so we'll get another cut at this whenever the process is brought back to us. So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 8A, receive a presentation on the unaudited monthly financial report for the period ending January 2025. Welcome, Ms. Allen.
Good evening, Council. Similar to how I did the last presentation, I have a summary page. I'll be to pull out any slide if you have a direct question on the slide, but to hit the highlights for the January unaudited financial sales tax proceeds are actually running very close to forecast. That is something that staff is aware of and we are monitoring. I don't think that is anything to be alarmed at, but we do need to monitor that and be aware in our spending and account accordingly. Property tax proceeds are up almost 25% compared to forecast. This is due to the majority of the property taxes being collected December through February. Impact fees are 31% below forecast. That's actually an improvement from the prior month where it was 41% below forecast. So we are seeing an improvement and some forward motion in the impact fee fund. Wastewater proceeds exceed forecast by 7.81% or $221K. Electric revenue is in 2% of forecast. We're running really close to forecast there. I think part of that is due that as of January, we hadn't really had a cold winter as we had in prior years, which is what that forecast is compared to. HOP proceeds are exceeding forecast by almost 17%, and development services are exceeding forecast by 30%. In regards to expenditures, general fund expenses are running 97.7% to forecast. This is due to an upfront cost of software as well as hail damage to vehicles and facilities. Those costs were accrued all up front. Wastewater fund expenditures are very similar. They're 97% to forecast. This is due to an upfront software expense. Electric expenses are 5.2% below forecast, as well as HOP funds are running 100% to forecast. This is due to some of the timing of the organizational expenses, as well as some city-sponsored events, the parade and Mardi Gras. Development Services is operating at 94.9% of their forecast, and all funds in with a bottom positive line.
For the general fund expenditures by department, this is, let's see, page 50 in the packet. There's two items. There's a city secretary that says it's over by almost $26,000 variance, and a fleet and facilities item that's $242,000 over the year-to-date budgeted, or year-to-date forecast is a better way to say that. Can you explain those two?
For the city secretary, I'm going to directly relate that to election fees, different costs with the election, as well as some services. And I'm sorry, what was that, their department?
The other one was fleet and facilities, $242,000.
I think that's part of the facilities and maintenance cost due to the hail damage.
And
Which we should be receiving an offset of insurance proceeds, of a
Yes.
revenue offset.
And would this then continue to show that it's off from the forecast, or would we need to do a budget amendment for that?
It should not. Once the proceeds are received, it should balance out.
We are still receiving those proceeds. I received some checks from TML today regarding that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that, those claims are taking a little bit to get processed through.
Okay, thank you.
The HOT fund is going to be a topic of discussion for us, and it is a fund that we need to closely monitor.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move on to item 8B, review and discuss the Bastrop Police Department budget and the hotel occupancy tax fund.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is, again, as we prepare, let me get through all of the slides that we, if you wanted us to dive into, we could have dove into. We're going to get to the police department. And so Chief Stefanik is here to answer any questions. But again, in a summary, her increases are related to personnel cost, they're related to equipment, and they're related to increases in fees. The dispatch service fee is a painful fee, and I'll let her explain that here in a minute. Right now, she has 37 FTEs, and that compares lower to similar cities our size. Elgin, for example, has 43 FTEs to our 40.75, which includes cadets. Her biggest obstacles are a larger facility and needing additional personnel. And we're going to laugh about this slide a little bit because it only shows expenses, because the police department doesn't really generate any revenue, and the revenue that it does generate is a general fund revenue, not specifically attributed to the police department. So even if she had some revenue to show there, the color would be minuscule in that chart. So Chief Stefanik is available for any questions.
What is your level of, how many open spots do you have? That's my question.
As of this week, I have one open spot. We've been at full staff, give or take, for the past month or two.
Okay. And how has your retention been?
So far, so good. Our retention, I'm trying to think of the majority of our officers are currently very, very brand-new officers. Typically, our patrol division is the department that has most of the new officers. Criminal investigations and administration and community resource are usually the people that have been here 10, 15 years.
And it shows here, and this is based upon the budget that we passed, a growth from, just over 4 million, maybe 4.2 last year, to this year a budgeted of just under 6. So can you tell us, and maybe just everybody else watching, with an increase that, 40% or so, what is that additional
What's
money
it
used
entail?
for? Yeah.
So typically, over the past few years, we had a 13% increase, another 13%. We then declined and went with a I say decline, but it's actually a 6% increase, and then we jumped to the 36% increase. The majority of that would be attributed to vehicles. We went from leasing vehicles to purchasing vehicles for each officer, which is common for departments. We did not have that. We had shared vehicles. And then the other expense is personnel, increases for salary, benefits, things of that nature.
Right, I recall the discussion on the vehicles. We had leased vehicles with limited mileage, and so then the cost to us to turn those in, because we had gone over the mileage, was projected to be very high, so we had to rearrange things to
Yes, sir.
prevent that minor problem from arising. Council, do you all have any other questions? Councilperson Foster.
I do. Just looking back on the 5-year history, like the revenue, the budgeted versus actual, is it just hard to, like it varies quite a bit, the budget from the actual on the revenue side? And I know you just had a comment about it, that I know it's not like a lot of revenue, but
So that's actual spent. That's not revenue. So ours is, we were budgeted, for example, in '21, just over $3 million. We actually spent all but $139,000 of our budget.
So
No,
yeah,
Chief,
it shows that
You do have some revenue lines. Some of that is grants.
We do. It's
Gotcha.
grants, it's
gotcha.
But the revenue is these little blue, the tiny micro ones,
tiny, yes.
I was actually looking at the
like budgeted
On the
versus
chart.
actuals?
budgeted versus actuals.
Oh, okay, yeah, so budgeted is how much expenses were budgeted in the budget, and then the
No,
actual.
she's talking about revenue.
Revenue, the one above it.
What was expected to be
Oh,
received
okay,
versus
got it.
what was actually received.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
That's my question, and it's grants, and hopefully we'll get more tonight. after
Mainly
tonight?
grants, yes.
Okay, okay.
Some of it is a sale of surplus, some of it, I mean, the police department, I'll say this again, I said it the other day, is there are a couple of departments in the city that the private sector never tries to come after. They don't make any money. Police, fire, libraries, parks, they don't make any money. We get the private sector after the water fund, the wastewater fund, the electric fund, the gas fund.
Well, carry on then, thank you, great work.
With the replacement of those vehicles, do you anticipate next year's requested budget to be similar to this year's, or lower because they've been replaced, or are there more vehicles to replace? What?
We do have a few vehicles that we held on to that, they're old vehicles, and we just use them kind of to get around town, or our property and evidence technician, she uses it to drive into Austin to do all of our lab deliveries. Them vehicles will need to be evaluated as far as maintenance. If the cost of maintenance is just ridiculous, that's something that I plan on working on in the next 2 weeks, so that way I can bring forth to budget workshops whether or not we will need an increase. Now, we probably won't need a 36% increase, but I'll take it if you're willing to give it to us, especially when it comes to personnel, but I don't foresee needing a tremendous amount of vehicles, at least, so.
Okay, thank you.
The stressor this year in the budget is that insurance rate that we passed off this past year. We were able to do the cost of living increases for the staff and the step increases because we had a rate pass. But we were told last year to expect a 16% rate increase this year. So among the employees, I've pretty much told everybody we're probably going to be flat as it relates to employee growth, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 positions that are needed and are funded by other opportunities.
Next item is the hotel occupancy fund.
So the hotel occupancy fund is a restricted fund, and it's called restricted because we have rules on what it can be used on. That's governed by Chapter 351 of the Local Government Code. It needs to provide furtherance of the first test, heads and beds, and it has to fit in one of the 9 categories. TML refers to it lovingly as the Texas two-step. And so number 1 is convention and visitor centers, convention registration, advertising the city, promotion of the arts, historical restoration and preservation, sporting events, enhancing or upgrading sports facilities, only in certain cities. We are a bracketed city, and tourist transportation systems and signage. So if you recall, our tourist transportation system was the e-cars that had the Visit Bastrop logo on them. But because those were not primarily used by tourists, those were primarily used by residents, that went away. Bastrop spends its money in Category 1, which is Convention and Visitor Center. Kathy's budget and the debt for the Convention Center is paid out of this fund. For promotion of the arts, 15% of this budget can be allocated to the arts, and historical restoration and preservation, another 15% can go toward that. And then 9, signage. We do have some signs that are paid downtown and other wayfinding signs that are paid through this. And number 3 is paid via the Visit Bastrop contract, which is 25% of this proposed budget at $1.2 million. We must revisit that. There is upward pressure on the convention center in terms of staffing. 2 of the staff members are actually budgeted out of the Main Street budget, which is halfway funded through the general fund. General fund can't sustain that when I'm talking about a librarian or I'm talking about a police officer versus a fund that can be funded out of the hotel occupancy tax. So we're going to have to revisit that. And then 25% of this budget toward Visit Bastrop is I will say it again and be the bad guy, is an astronomical amount. You can quote me, that's okay. The convention center debt has a couple of years left on the debt, and part of the plan, if I can make it happen, is if we get a qualified hotel on board, that part of that negotiation is the payoff of that convention center debt so that we can free that up. That convention center becomes a civic center that can then be used as a recreation center. Today, because it's paid with hot funds, it has a restriction, and the restrictions are pretty severe.
What is, I mean, I see some spreadsheets that have bonds on them and such, but what is the total debt current for the convention center?
Shy of $4 million.
Okay.
So the hotel occupancy fund for a while was a very tightly managed fund, and there was a large fund balance, and so some of those expenses exceed revenue. Those were intentional drawdowns of fund balance. We are at a point today where there's a fund balance of only $7,000 above what is required, and so the fund balance is still a hefty fund balance. It's a little shy of $1 million that sits in reserve. That's 25% of the, let's say, operating budget of about $4 million. We do have several hotels trending to come on board, and so I anticipate the fund being healthy enough to continue to pay its obligations, but again, those are things we need to watch. The council did agree to the $1 million grant to the Bastrop Opera House, which is $1 million a year for the next 10 years, and we agreed that if the fund was healthier, then we would pay it off sooner, and so that's the way that contract is written. That qualifies into that.
No,
I think it was $100K a year.
It's $100K a year for 10 years. It's $1 million.
You said $1 million a year.
Oh, sorry. No, it's not $1 million a year. Sorry. It's $100,000 a year for the next 10 years. Sorry. I saw the shocked look on faces. Sorry.
Yeah.
If Lisa was here, she'd be dancing a jig. $100,000 a year. But that $100,000 incorporates into that 15% cap of historic restoration. So, you know, as we balance the needs of the African American cultural, as we balance the needs of the existing museum and visitor center, those are all things to consider. Questions?
Okay, no questions. Thank you, Madam City Manager. So next is item 9, citizen comments. I do have some forms for an agenda item, so that's not what this is, what this section is for. This is for general comments. And we don't have any citizen comments currently, or do you? Okay. Okay. So that's on item 10K. 10N, 11D. Okay, so we continue to not have any general citizen comments, so we will move on. We are now going to go into executive session. And then when we come out, we will do the consent agenda and the individual items for consideration and/or take any action required for the executive session. So, item 4A, under executive session, City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 55101 and 072 to seek the advice of legal counsel regarding the possible acquisition of property adjacent to Blakey Lane. City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551, 071, 072, and 551, 087 to seek the advice of legal counsel regarding the real estate and economic development aspects of a potential development of a qualified hotel project. 4C, City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551071 to seek the advice of legal counsel regarding the law as it applies to sign regulations for digital billboards, i.e. off-premises electronic message centers with LED lights. Item 4D, City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551072 and 551087 to seek the advice of legal counsel regarding the Mike's Bikes license agreement. 4E, City Council shall convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551072 and 551087 to seek the advice of legal counsel regarding an economic development agreement with Burleson Crossing East. And one final one, also under 551071, will be uh, 11D, consider an act on the first reading of ordinance 2025-14, apportioning the cost of certain improvements to property in and for the Valverde Public Improvement District Area Number 1. And so council is now in executive session at 7:46 p.m. Okay, it is 8:39 p.m. We are back from executive session, and there are no actions that we are going to take based upon the discussion there. We are now going to move on to the consent agenda, and this is going to be, this will be fun, so please bear with us. First, Councilperson Fossler will address this in just a moment, please, briefly. She's going to recuse herself from several of the consent agenda items, and so we're going to split those off. That's going to be items 10B, 10C, 10D, 10E, and 10J. And so unless any of those get pulled off by other council members for individual consideration, Councilperson Foster will excuse herself from the room while we take a vote. Would you like to say anything briefly?
Sure, yes. About this recusal, I received a new and different legal opinion today, and therefore I'm going to recuse myself from discussion, vote, and decision on ordinances impacting P3 development and subdivision until further clarification can be provided. And just to be clear, I don't personally have a conflict of interest, no ownership interest, and no financial interest, but my sister and brother-in-law have been developing a property in the north end of Bastrop that they've had in front of city staff since 2022. And so out of abundance of caution, I'm going to step aside until there's more clarity because I want there to be trust in this process. Thank you.
Okay. Councilperson Meyer, you said you had a question for
Yes,
legal?
and my question probably would be for legal. Considering that, then, City Attorney, any previous 10 months' actions that could have been a conflict, is there a problem with that?
Stan Springley, Assistant City Attorney. No, I don't believe there's a problem because, as she said, she's acted on advice of counsel and is making good faith efforts to follow and get clarification.
Perfect. Just want to make sure we are all.
Okay, thank you. And legal has advised the rest of us that we do not have a conflict. So,
Mayor Pro Tem, you don't have a conflict on this item. You will file disclosure notices at the next meeting, at the May 4th meeting, March 4th.
that's correct. And that would simply be that each of us own a home in Bastrop. And so, but that will be on the next item. Turns out we also have trees and animals, but those don't.
You know, we each own different homes in
Yes.
Bastrop, though.
No, we live together in a commune in Bastrop, right? Yes, we all own our individual homes in Bastrop. Councilperson Foster. Well, you turned your light back on, so okay, got it. So, council, without any objection, I'm going to put 10B, 10C, 10D, E, and J for a separate consent agenda vote. And so, Councilperson Foster. This is how the rules work for us. The person who is recusing themselves is supposed to step out of the room for the discussion and subsequent vote. So we're going to follow that. So, Assistant City Secretary, will you please read 10B, 10C, 10D, 10E, and 10J?
Item 10B, consider an act on the second reading of ordinance number 2025-10 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, Texas, amending the Code of Ordinances related to Chapter 14, the Building Block B3 Code, Article 6.3, General Lot Standards, 6.3.004, Protected and Heritage Trees E. Item 10C, consider an act on the second reading of ordinance number 2025-11 of the City Council of the City of Bastrop, amending the Code of Ordinances related to Chapter 14, the Bastrop Building Block B3 Code, Article 6.3, General Lot Standards, 6.3.004, Protected and Heritage Trees, adding C and D 1, 2, 3, and 4, 6.3.004, Protected and Heritage Trees, changing E1, 4, and adding 4A and B, and 6, 6.3.004, Protected and Heritage Trees, changing F1, 4, and adding 4A and B, and 6, 6.3.004, Protected and Heritage Trees, adding G1, A, B, and C, and H, 1 and 2, 6.3.004, Protected and Heritage Trees, adding I2. Item 10D, consider an act on the second reading of ordinance number 2025-12, amending the Code of Ordinances related to Chapter 14, the Bastrop Building Block B3 Code, Chapter 10, definitions, adding definitions for native plants, invasive plants, and ISA certified arborist. Item 10E, consider an act on the second reading of ordinance number 2025-13, amending the Code of Ordinances related to Chapter 14, the Bastrop Building Block B3, Technical Manual Table 2.1.003, Preferred Plant List. Item 10J, 10J, consider an act on the first reading of ordinance 2025-15, amending Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, General Provisions, Article 1.20, Uniformity of Requirements, amending Section 1.20.015, Appeal of Board of Adjustment to Appeal of City Council, amending subsection A and C, removing subsection B and D, and to move to include on the March 11, 2025 consent agenda for a second reading.
Thank you very much.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Plunkett. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Can we invite Councilperson Foster back in the room? Okay, so now for the remainder of the consent agenda, we have some comments. No, we're good. So we're going to start with item Item 10N. This is Cecilia Cerna. So please come up to the dais. You have 3 minutes. There is. I just picked this one up first.
Okay, not sure it has to go in order. Cecilia Cerna, 1104 Hill Street. The only thing I have on that is on overruns must be approved by council. The thing I question is, what if there is a bias between certain members of the council and then they vote down, expanding what the fee or how much the person is using on legal fees? That may be a conflict of interest. So I just wanted to bring that up and see if that could possibly be a little bit more, I don't know, clearly delineated or just explained a little bit better, because I think it needs to be discussed a little bit more and think about the what-ifs.
Thank you. And what is this one? And then in 10K, which is Cecilia Cerna.
Cecilia Cerna, 1104 Hill Street. I'm opposed to this, very much so, because I don't see why you would want to remove a council member if the EDC has its own term. Let the terms be the terms. I don't see why one has to affect the other. You want some continuity in membership. So I don't think you should kick somebody off because they're no longer or weren't reelected to council or something like that. It kind of seems like they're being penalized. And like I said, you lose the continuity by having people drop off sooner than what the term is for the EDC.
Let's see. Okay. So now for the consent agenda, we're going to pull 10I. We have a number of comments for 10I. And Councilperson Foster, you had one.
10O and 10A, please.
Alpha?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, council, any others? Okay, so we're going to pull 10I, 10O, and 10A. So that leaves F, G, H, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U. Are there any additional ordinances? Yes. So 10F, 10G, 10H, $10K. So consistent with the way we did this last week, we are required to read the ordinances in the heading of the ordinance in 2 meetings, so this will be the first or second reading of those. The remainder of the consent agenda will simply say something like, and the rest of the consent agenda as listed in the packet.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
There's so many, I'm trying to find it. The one regarding removal of the city council member from board. Are we pulling, is 10K pulled?
No, it's not.
I'd like to pull 10K.
So we're pulling 10A, I, K, and O?
A, I, K, and O, yes.
And we are reading 10F, 10G, and 10H.
Correct.
Item 10F, consider an act on the first reading of ordinance number 2025-06, amending Chapter 15, Article 50.01, Cemeteries of the Bastrop Code of Ordinances, and Appendix A, Fee Schedule, Article A 15.01, Fairview Cemetery, to reflect an increase in fees for the purchase of cemetery plots, burial, open-close fees, and establishing a price for columbarium niches, and move to include on the March 11, 2025 consent agenda for a second reading. Item 10G, consider an act on the first reading of ordinance number 2025-16, adopting the master fee schedule, repealing the Appendix A fee schedule of the Code of Ordinance, amending certain fees and establishing costs and fees charged by the City of Bastrop, providing for a penalty for a 01, Section 1.01.009 of the City Code of Ordinances, and move to place on the March 11, 2025 consent agenda for a second reading. Item 10H, consider an act on the first reading of ordinance number 2025-18, adopting a local property tax exemption for qualifying child care facilities as defined by Texas Tax Code 11.36 of Bastrop, Texas, by adding Article 11.05 Child Care Facility Exemption, and move to include on the March 11, 2025 consent agenda for a second reading.
Okay, council. That is the ordinances that we have remaining on the consent agenda, and then we will go visit the pulled ones in a moment. Is there a motion for those?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, second is with Foster. Motion is with Meyer. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So, let us take up I. So this is consider an act on the first reading of ordinance 2025-17, amending Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, Animal Control, Article 202, Vaccination and Licensing of Dogs and Cats, and Article 204, Impoundment, removing Section 20204, License, Tag, and Collar, amending Section 20208, Licensing and Fees to Pet Registration Requirement, and removing subsection A through C, removing Section 20406, Confinement of female dogs and cats during estrus, move to include on the March 11, 2025 consent agenda for a second reading.
Good afternoon, James County Development Services. I want to introduce Robert McBain. He's our Code Compliance Officer, Animal Control, and he's been with the city about a year, and he's here to talk to you about pet registration.
I met him in the front yard of my neighbor across the street, chasing down a literal pig.
Yes, that was me.
Welcome to Bastrop.
Yeah. We did catch that pig, so
Yes.
that was a good thing.
I saw it, yeah.
So my name's Robert. I'm here with Animal Control and Code Enforcement, and basically we want to just kind of update our ordinance to reflect microchipping instead of the old way of doing it, which was just a tag that would often get lost. With the microchipping, it also comes with a tag. It's placed underneath the skin. It's always with the animal. It can't ever be lost. And we feel that that's going to help us return more animals back to their homes, keep more animals out of the shelter, and yeah.
Councilor, do you have any questions? What? Do you have questions? But not, that's not a question, so we will get to that. Okay, so now we have some citizens' comments on this one. We have, the first one is from Amy Mills, and she does not wish to speak, nor did she indicate support or opposition in the checkbox. But Amy, your comments are all here and will be entered in the public record, and we have all read them here on council. We also have comments from Linda Graham, who does not wish to speak, but supports this particular item. We have Maggie Abbott, who does not wish to speak and supports this particular item. And then we have Jeremy Parks, who does wish to speak, and he is also an expert in this area, and I've told him I will give him longer than 3 minutes, and we can ask him questions if we wish along the way. So Jeremy, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on this. For the sake of time, I've got several notes and data points here as well. But specifically, I am in support of the item 10I as well as the ordinance 2025-17. There's a lot of information to cover about microchips. I did provide you guys with a two-sided handout specific to microchips and other cities and all sorts of information that should have been distributed to you guys prior to the beginning of the council meeting. I'm a City of Bastrop resident. I'm also the executive director of Save an Angel. We are a nonprofit animal welfare organization here in the community. And really quick side note, we hosted our first rabies vaccine clinic here at City Hall on Saturday, and we were able to vaccinate 75 pets for rabies completely for free, even with the weather. It was a great turnout. So thank you guys for having us, and we're looking forward to hosting future events like that, of which we will include microchipping as well. So microchips are a small rice-sized identification device that's implanted under a pet's skin. I actually have a microchip here. You guys can pass it around to see what that looks like. And the number that's on there is the number that would show up when you scan a pet's microchip. This is a universal microchip scanner. Any animal welfare professional, animal welfare organizations, veterinary hospitals, animal shelters have scanners. These are universal scanners. You scan the chip. It emits a frequency to the chip. The chip sends back the number, and that number is unique to that pet, and that number will be registered into a national lost pet database. And so that is a tool that animal control officers can utilize in the field to contact the pet registry to try and reunite animals directly in the field without their ever going to the shelter.
How reliable is the pet registry side of it? I've kind of contemplated, you register an animal lives 15 years and you move 3 times and you've got your first address on it. And
absolutely. And so education is a huge piece to microchipping with all of responsible pet ownership. A microchip is only effective if the pet parent's contact information is kept up to date. The microchip company and the registry that we use is a completely free registry, and you can call them, you can go on their website, you can make those updates at no cost, as well as all of the pets that come into our clinic. We scan them for a chip. We verify that those chips are working every time they come in on an annual visit, and we provide that pet parent with the information needed to update their chip and encourage them to do so.
How reliable are they?
So I've got some statistics here actually for you guys. So nationally, about 52% of microchipped dogs and cats and about 38% of microchipped, 52% of dogs, 38% of cats are returned. Pets that are not microchipped, only 22% of dogs and 2% of cats are able to be returned, and that's a national statistic. Here in the city of Bastrop, based off of national averages, there's about 1,800 dogs and 1,400 cats. Again, that's a calculation based off of a national average. I suspect, in my professional opinion, there are far more than that, but that's thousands of pets who would benefit from this ordinance and give them a better chance at being reunited. And then I actually have some statistics specific to our clinic. We service about 9,000 individual dogs and cats a year. Of those 9,000 last year, 8,100 of them were Bastrop County residents. Of those 8,100 pets, 53% of those pets that already came to us were microchipped, or they got microchipped the day of their appointment with us. And so these numbers demonstrate that many pet owners in our community already recognize the value of microchipping. Really, we're looking at about that 47% based off of our local numbers. And then we also recognize that access to microchipping and access to care, regardless of the socioeconomic means to do so, is really important. And as a nonprofit, our goal is to continue to offer that low-cost microchipping option. It's $22. It's a one-time fee. You pay it. The chip is implanted, and it's registered to you as the pet parent for the life of the animal in one of those registries. And then we would also like to commit, as part of this, to working with local businesses and local donors to facilitate and sponsor free microchip drives here at City Hall in the parking lot through our mobile clinic. So I think this is a really great opportunity to not only reduce the burden on taxpayers as far as animal service fees go. It would allow Robert, Mr. McBain, to reunite animals directly in the field. If he's able to find a microchip on a pet, contact the company, gets either the address, the phone number, and he can take it straight to their door and reunite them, eliminating that fee that would be billed to county to impound that pet. So overall, in my opinion, professionally and personally as a resident, I think it would be a very powerful tool, and it would promote responsible pet ownership and ensure the safety and protection of pets here in the community.
Council, do you have any questions for Jeremy? Councilperson Meyer.
Yes, not really a question, but just you answered a concern that I had was the cost. But the $22, but if we can continue to promote free access, that would be so wonderful. So we as a city need to do everything we can too. So thank
absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Councilperson Fossler.
I agree with everything you said, and I'm wondering what you think about it being mandated and required.
Ultimately, I think that given my professional opinion, given the circumstances of what we see in the animals that we deal with, approximately 50% are already microchipped. A lot of pet parents don't necessarily do it because it's not required, but they do it once they experience their pet getting lost, a tragedy, an emergency, a fire. Almost every single time something like that occurs, we see them at our clinic within a week or two, and they're telling us, I wish I would have done this, I wish I would have done this sooner. But a lot of times it's not really at the forethought until something does happen, until their pet does get lost. And so I personally, as a resident and professionally, as an organization, think that the mandate would be essential and very beneficial to the safety of the pets.
Yeah, but, well, no, we're doing questions, yeah. We'll ask it. There you go.
One of my concerns is, you know, as far as the mandate goes, is it's kind of like people that don't want to take pills. They don't like pills. They don't want something foreign in their bodies. They don't want this. They don't want that. And the dogs don't have a say-so, or the cats don't have a say-so. We're forcing them to do this. I did look up, like, complications, and it's bleeding, hematomas, migration, meaning the chip can move, it might not work, infection, swelling, and tumor formation.
Sure.
I'm not opposed to microchips. I know some people have them. My animals don't have them. But there are people that don't want their animals to have them, and because of the risk, I don't think we should force them.
I'm not a veterinarian, so I can't
about
speak to the medical side of things.
Okay.
Ultimately, that would be a conversation that they would need to have directly with their veterinarian to discuss the concerns. From my professional experience, the rate of complication is incredibly low. That being said, there is always a risk associated with any medical procedure for pets or humans. And then, I've seen other cities that have adopted kind of that variance or the caveat that says with a letter from a licensed veterinarian, they could be exempt from that. And so that's something that you guys could certainly consider to create that opportunity for those that are truly concerned about the well-being of their pet. I know there's several cities listed in that handout that I provided you guys, Lockhart and San Marcos, that have adopted mandatory microchip ordinances locally within the last couple of years. And we know, working with other professionals within the industry, that has ultimately increased the live outcome rate of their local shelters. It has increased responsible pet ownership. It has increased the rate of reunification with lost pets, ultimately reducing the burden on the taxpayers as well. So.
Thank you.
So Jeremy just showed up randomly today, and I saw him in his blue shirt as he walked in and greeted him, and asked him what he was coming in for, kind of guessing it might be this item, and it was. And he said he was bringing in show and tell and things like that. So I said, well then, great, an expert witness to at least give us additional information, and so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mayor, if I could?
Yes, ma'am.
So one of the important things, Councilmember Lee, is coming from a city who managed its own animal shelter, 2 cities. It's a very, very, very difficult thing, especially when you're trying to achieve no kill, which is what all animal shelters are trying to achieve. When you are overburdened with too many pets, because there are massive amounts, especially out in the county and the rural areas, of pet owners who just don't spay and neuter their animals. Save an Angel has been a resource in the county. It's still widely underutilized. The part about the microchip is it lets Robert scan the microchip. It prevents that pet from even entering the shelter. Because I'll tell you, when the shelter gets to capacity or there is an outbreak at the shelter, those pets will be euthanized. And we're trying to prevent them from even entering the shelter. One of the considerations is if he can find corporate sponsors to pay down the price for folks who can't afford the $22. And their fees already now are specifically low. So it's a two-part point. How do we reduce the kill in the shelters, which is still a very high number, whether we want to admit it or not? And then how do we help pet owners get to that point of the microchip?
So my thing though is, all day long, every day, people, I lost my dog, help me find my dog. People that really love their dogs are gonna call the shelters. They're gonna call the city. They're gonna call the county. They wanna find their dog. People that really, really love their dogs. And the situations, and I'm no expert and I don't work at the animal center, but those people don't want their dogs. If someone's mostly lost their dog, they're gonna hunt that dog down. I think a lot of people are giving their dogs away, or they're losing them and not looking for them, and that's not always the case. I'm not saying that that's not always the case, but I go back to people that love dogs love their dogs. So they're either going to microchip that dog, or they're going to hunt down every social media page available to them to find it. But for people that don't want their dogs to have a foreign object in them, I don't feel like they should be.
Sure, and there's if you guys want to write an exemption in the ordinance about you want a letter because you have some other tracking device, you've got an AirTag, you've got a GPS, whatever, that's totally fine. I think the end goal at this point is right now we have a tag ordinance on the book. I hate to have ordinances that we don't even enforce. We don't have the amount of dog catchers and cats and everything else to be doing that. So let's take that off the books. Let's put something reasonable that should have a meaningful impact. But if you guys want to write a segment that says, yeah, if you want to put an AirTag on your dog as opposed to a microchip under the skin, great, wonderful. Just make sure.
What's your plan to track it down? I mean, how are you going to hunt down every single resident owner that has a dog?
Well, you don't, and it's by the time he catches them. So. And that's, remember, all of our ordinances, they're always reactionary.
Right.
Yeah, they're reactionary. He's not going to go out knocking on doors and checking if your dog has a microchip. That is not the intent. The intent is when he finds those dogs loose. And I'll tell you, both communities I came from are on the coast. One of them was a very affluent community where they were second and third homes, and people left their dogs on purpose. Because they knew they were going to come back that following week, or because we had a shelter that would take care of them. It wasn't until I had an outbreak in my shelter that I had to send out a 72-hour euthanasia notice to everybody. And if you haven't Googled me and found PETA and seen me dressed as Cruella de Vil, I suggest you do that. Because that was a horrible, I had people show up at council with blood and meat, and PETA folks are a whole different breed. But the whole point is we're trying to not even get them into the shelter.
So what happens if you microchip it and it goes back to a residence and they're like, oh, I don't want that dog?
Then that's a surrender. That's a surrender that they do to Robert, and Robert will then file the surrender paperwork and go take the dog to the shelter.
Does the homeowner have to pay anything? So if the
Is there a
resident, if
surrender
you
cost?
microchip it, they say I don't want it, are they going to have to pay a fee for it to be housed in the
Yeah,
shelter?
speak it. Okay.
So our current ordinance, the registered animal is $25. $22 for a microchip is much better. It's just a shot underneath the skin, similar to like a rabies shot. Every animal is supposed to have its rabies shots. So your question was?
If you microchip my dog and then you call me and say, hey, I have your dog at City Hall, I don't want that dog, does the person get fined or have to pay a fee because now you're taking it to the shelter?
So I had this almost exact similar thing happen where a person's dog was microchipped. They rehomed the dog 5 years ago. We scan the dog, comes with a microchip. We do all the research. The people live at Georgetown. I got rid of my dog. The new people didn't upgrade their contact information, and so the animal went to the shelter. Okay? Animals are still going to go to the shelter, but this is a way to get them back home.
I understand. What I'm asking is, will that person be charged a fee? Will the
No,
resident be charged a fee?
the city will be charged $270 to take that dog to the shelter, each and every time. But they're not charged that.
So trying to clarify is, we have existing ordinance on the book that is old, outdated, cities have done away for years. Is there's an annual fee with that instead of paying that annual fee. Part of animal control and working with people is most homeowners or pet owners don't realize they've lost most of the dogs, cats we find, the homeowners don't even know they're missing. We're a tourist town where people lose their pets and stuff. So the goal is to get that pet before it ever gets reported, it gets run over. And if we can get that pet straight back to the owner without going to the shelter, every animal we take to the shelter costs us $270. So that's the first saving. Every animal we take back, the goal is not to penalize anybody, it's just get that pet back to the right owner before it gets run over and not spend $270 at a shelter.
I totally get it, and I'm not against it. But when you say mandate, it freaks people out. So,
And I think
I get the goal of it is maybe encourage
Sure.
residents, and we're encouraging you to get the microchip, and for doing that, it's only $22. But when you throw out the words like mandate, people are, you can't make me do what I don't want to do. That's the attitude you get from people, and that's
Sure.
what I've gotten today.
And one comment specific to if a pet parent loves their pet, they're going to go get it or not. A lot of the times that we see animals come through the shelter and they are microchipped, they've been lost, they've been stolen, they've come here from other cities. And so it is a permanent form of identification that enables us to reunite them with the pet parent regardless of location. We've had pets that have come from other states, and those families come and drive here because they had been stolen 3 months prior, and then they come here. So it's not necessarily they're going to check their local shelter. It's a national form of a recovery database that allows us to reunite with a pet parent regardless of their location. And theft is a very great example of that we do see on a routine basis. So.
Councilperson Foster.
My questions are for the ordinance, more about the ordinance, sorry, so you can step aside. There's no penalty, I don't see a penalty listed in the ordinance, right?
No. So I took the ordinance exactly from San Marcos, the way it's written. We could attach a penalty to it if we needed to, but I don't feel like that's necessary. I did have a case recently where the animal was microchipped, got out, attacked another dog. The person told me that, no, my dog never gets out. After researching the microchip, I found out that the dog had got out, had bit a person before. The dog had gotten out before and gone to the shelter. And then it attacked another dog. So we were able to keep the history on that animal as well.
Right, cool. And how many people are currently complying with the current pet registration?
Well, I have a...
'Cause I'm not one of them, I just forgot that.
The problem with the current registration that we have is we don't have a good database for it. So I have 9 animals that were registered from 2017 and 2018. And that's what we have in an Excel sheet.
Okay.
Out of the 6,000 people that live in the city of Bastrop.
I did a gut, all my neighbors are animal owners, responsible ones, and I just did a gut check at 12 out of 12, and like all of them were like, love the idea, do not require it. Like, how are you going to enforce it? What's the penalty? Like, please don't require it. So everybody loved the spirit of it, and I just think it needs more. I think the ordinance needs more work and more conversation before we pass it. I spoke to someone who has like 21 years experience in this and handles all the contracts for the larger cities, who provides the free services and fills in those gaps and has those $1 million contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts. And she's here, she lives in our community, she could also be available as a resource. Many of my comments and concerns were taken, I asked her to submit this because they were taken from the comments of our conversations. That usually cities don't replace the tag, but it's a secondary method. The microchipping ends up being a second method for their ordinance. and communities who usually pass this as a requirement, the cities end up contributing a substantial amount to subsidize those who can't access it. So that's something I want to talk about before we go mandating anything. And then just for cost analysis, Bastrop Vet is $77. Crossroads is $38 for microchipping. No other office fees, but they have to be updated on rabies. And Essential Vet Care is $48, but you have to be an established patient. So I'm glad to know about the 22. I just don't want to cause I don't want to require anything.
So I think you have a valid point. If, let's say you have your own personal vet and you don't want to use Save an Angel, you could go to one of those vets, any vet, and have your dog microchipped there. Most of them charge a fee, $30, $40. I called all the vets in the area. And then there's also a fee typically to register that animal with that vet or with the microchip company. So the vet charges a $40 fee and then usually like a $30 for registering the animal, and he may charge an exam fee. With what we could do with Save an Angel, and this is going to be somewhat voluntary, but yet, yeah, we kind of want to mandate it. I mean, we want to tell people this is what we want. We want people in the city of Bastrop to be able to get their pets back. On the 4th of July, I'm sure he can speak to me about how many animals get lost over fireworks. I've had several cases where animals get hit by a car and the owners don't know where my animal's at. Well, he's at the vet because we've taken him to the vet and we're contacting you and trying on the phone trying to get you to the vet so you can, give your animal care.
I understand all of that, all of the reunification and all the cost saving. I understand all of that. I would prefer more community conversation, since I did a gut check of 12 out of 12 were no on the ordinance as it is written. I am supportive of working the ordinance until it has a better litmus test through my neighbors and the community. But I am a fan of continuing to work with this ordinance, but not as proposed.
I have a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'm okay if we keep talking about it, I guess. Yeah, I'd like to get it right.
Okay, motion dies due to lack of second.
Pass it on.
So do we have another motion?
Motion to table for a date certain, please. That's what I'm looking
For a day certain, and can we have a town hall about it? Can we have a?
for. Sure, if you give me a date certain in the future, that gives me time to have a town hall. I'm happy to have it.
So the day certain is for the town hall or for a meeting after the town hall?
For a meeting after.
For a meeting after the town hall. Like right this minute?
60 days from
60 days from today. I'd like to make a motion to, not table, what is the word, postpone?
No table.
Table 60 days until today, and to call a community town hall meeting about it.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilperson Foster, a second from Councilperson Lee. Any other discussion or debate? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, the next item we're going to go to is 10O. So this is consider an act on resolution number R 2025-33, accepting a donation for engineered wood fiber kitty mulch for Bob Bryant Park Playground and Kerr Community Park Playground in the amount of $17,057 from Ascension Catholic Church as part of the Toyota Way Forward Fund grant.
Council, I'm going to call up, Terry Moore is out. She's at a conference right now, so I'm going to stand in for her. But I'm going to call up Carlos Lariano, Priscilla Ruiz, and Debbie Moore. They're going to speak to this item, and I think they have a presentation.
We're not going to take long. I promise we'll be brief. We just want to give you some money. We want to give the city money. Come on, Mr. Liriano. So my name is Priscilla Ruiz. Council members, Mayor, thank you so much for your service to our community. We do have a proposal for you, or I guess a consent agenda item. Toyota Way Forward Fund is really just a great foundation that has done so much research in brain injury. So the research has all been done. They have done 4 cycles of grant funding for hospitals, research teams, universities, and so forth. The last round of funding has really been geared and earmarked toward communities for community engagement, for prevention, safety, and awareness of traumatic brain injury, particularly in children. So whether you know it or not, fact is that child mortality rate is 30% higher 1 year out from initial care at ER departments with low pediatric readiness. So we are still considered a pretty good distance from a trauma hospital, and so our school system has been a great partner for this work. So I am the grant writer. We did this through Ascension Catholic Church. Carlos is sort of the brainchild. He came to me with this idea and said, "Hey, Toyota's doing this. We should do our community. We care about health, we care about wellness, we care about the holistic approach for our kids. So let's apply for this grant." So I said, yes, let's do it. So we have, the greater part of this grant has actually gone to the Independent School District to put together curriculum for our students. So it will be delivered by our athletic trainers, our coaches, our teachers for grades K through 12. And then this particular mission is a part of the grant that we earmarked for soft landing material for some of the parks that would need it perhaps, and then some safety signs for prevention and awareness. So you talk a little too.
Well, I just want to.
Who are you?
I'm sorry. I'm Carlos Liriano, 1208 Church. This is an example of what we can accomplish when we come together. Priscilla wrote the grant. Ascension Catholic administered the money. The school system is implementing this curriculum. Bastrop County receives $170,000. This grant, this money tonight is just a small portion, but Toyota invested $170,000 into our community. This would never have happened if our community would not have worked together to show Toyota that we can implement this program. So I'm very grateful to all the parties. Great job, Priscilla. Thank you, Bastrop, and let's work together to bring some more money.
Yes, absolutely. And I know you haven't passed it yet officially, but I did want to give a shout out to Terry Moore, and she's not here tonight, but she was instrumental in helping us put this together and making it a consent agenda item for you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, do you have any questions?
No, motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we're going to give that one to Councilperson Plunkett. The motion was from Councilperson Foster. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Now we can accept your check. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are now going to go back to 10A. Consider an act on the second reading of ordinance number 2025-07, establishing and adopting a short-term rental registration process, amending the Bastrop Code of Ordinances, Chapter 4, by enacting 413, Sections 413.01 through 12, titled Short-Term Rentals. Hold one second. So this is a second reading. We passed it the last time with the staff report. That's available, that video, that discussion in the prior meeting. So I don't want to do that again if we don't have to. Councilperson Foster, what would you like to do with this item?
Thank you for your thoroughness at the last meeting. I only want 3 words added, and that is when we talk about the hotel occupancy taxes, we talked to people in the town hall about we're only going to look at the current year. So just anywhere it says all fees required under this chapter, including hotel occupancy taxes required, verification that the owner or operated has no delinquent hotel occupancy taxes just for current year. Just 3 words is all I want everywhere that's mentioned so we can be consistent with the presentations that we had with the residents.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Motion to approve.
No, motion to approve with your change. Please say your change in the motion.
Motion to approve with adding just for current year everywhere that hotel occupancy taxes are mentioned.
Second.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion from Councilperson Foster, a second from Councilperson Lee. Any other? Oh, Councilperson Plunkett. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to make sure because you said every place where it's mentioned. So I just want to make sure there's no other place where that we would be adding that where it wouldn't make sense. I'm not. Anybody want to? Can you just maybe if you just said what paragraph? Or
Yeah, are there
because just in case
2 or 3 of them only?
There's like 18
or?
places where it says hotel occupancy tax. It would be weird.
Sure. I can. It's 2AI. No, sorry. 2I.
There's also numerical numbers, so if you just call out the text line number.
Oh, on the far left, I was wondering what those were.
Yeah, so it's just so you can clearly identify the lines of text, and it's pretty clear.
87.
There you go.
101. 111.
Bingo. Oh, sorry.
And 175. Thank you for that index.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I assume you're amending your motion to add it on lines 87, 101, 111, and 175.
I am.
You are. And Councilperson Lee, do you accept that?
I accept.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, well then, council, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. 10A is complete. Now we will move to 10K. Consider an act on the first reading of ordinance number 2025-20, amending section 10402, membership terms of the Code of Ordinances to remove any elected from appointed boards or commissions when their term ends either by election or resignation, and to move to include on the March 11th, 2025 consent agenda for the second reading.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This, as the ordinance is written, every advisory body, board commission will have a council member assigned as a council liaison. The EDC board, the Ethics Commission, a couple of other have an actual council member assigned. The BEDC, that's just a recent phenomenon, and I bring that up because that was the example I gave you in your packet. So if you'll read the ordinance on the language, it says, a council member whose term has ended either by election or resignation shall be removed from any board or commission that they're currently serving on at the time the election is canvassed. And this is a relatively simple, or at least I thought it was simple, agenda item so that these terms of service correspond with the election. So we have elections in May, but our boards and commissions don't typically get seated until October, November. So there's a period of overlap. And we will have council members who will not be able to serve on a board or commission because there's no room on that board or commission if the board or commission is full. This is really just meant to align the election with the service period on boards or commissions. The council has the opportunity to remove members at any time. It's just, that's not always the popular thing to do, especially if it's a well-liked person, even if they're leaving on their own. So this is really just meant to be a ministerial action that happens as somebody terms off. That person who gets elected in their place gets to serve the remainder of their term.
Yeah, as part of BEDC, I don't know, I almost call it reorganization over time, we put 4 council members on the BEDC so that it would set the expectation that the organization would come into line and do the things that was asked of it by the city. And then we went through a few elections, and we're down to 2 in effect. And so if, for instance, the person who was there because they were a council member was no longer there and were replaced as proposed in the ordinance by the person that replaced them on council, then we wouldn't have that specific complication with the BEDC.
And in terms of continuity of service, yes, there is that concern about, well, you're losing a council member who has served 2 terms, for example, 6 years, and they're on the board. But I have to remind folks, at what point are we willing to hear new ideas? If somebody has won an election that these residents have put in place, shouldn't they serve in the places where that body is required to serve, i.e. any boards or commissions that are assigned to that place?
Councilperson Lee.
Thank you. So there are no boards or commissions that are assigned to that place. Does the zoning have a council member on it? Zoning Board of Adjustments?
Zoning Board of Adjustment has a liaison.
And I've never seen one on the Ethics Commission.
It doesn't have a liaison. It says it's not appropriate for a staff liaison, the ZBA.
It doesn't have a staff liaison.
Oh.
Or a council liaison.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's me.
And I've never seen a council member on the Ethics Commission. Who's on the Ethics Commission?
I think that's me too.
So for me, when that person leaves council, they're a resident, and there's no requirement that any amount of council members be on EDC.
Correct.
So it could be 1 or it could be 0, and public opinion is there should be none. So that's not a requirement. The person is appointed by the mayor to serve a term. They won't be liaison, of course, because he or she won't be on council anymore. I don't see the problem in them fulfilling their term, whatever their term is, and then they have to reapply just like anybody else. To me, it feels like we're going back to this, we pick and choose who we want on what board and commission. We're stifling people's ability to volunteer, because if somebody's on council where they've sat here for 3 years, 6 years, they obviously are committed to the city and want to be involved and want to be part of the city. So whether they're sitting on council or not, once they leave council, unless they say, I don't want to be on a board or commission, I'm going on vacation, why can't they serve out their term? What prompted this? What's the harm in it? There is no harm in it. And yes, council can remove people from boards, but there's typically a reason why you're being removed. If you're being disruptive or you're causing harm to the efforts of the board. If that person is a productive person on the board and the board doesn't have a problem with them still sitting on it, why are we dictating the boards and commissions, especially when they're appointed to serve a term? That's just my take on it.
So the council can remove anybody for reason or no reason?
Because they can doesn't mean they should.
Absolutely correct. But again, from an elected official perspective, I'm really thinking of that awkward overlap, specifically to BEDC, because it happened this last election period.
It wasn't an awkward overlap, and it's happened before. There was no awkward overlap. And the person would have filed again had they thought they would be accepted again. That's what made it awkward. There was no awkward overlap. We're making it an awkward overlap rather than just letting the person finish out their term. Again, if the board is not asking for them to be removed because they haven't been disruptive on the board, they've contributed, I'm all about, switching people out so that you have a difference of opinion. But I'm not about putting people on boards, on commissions, so that you can isolate who you want on boards and commissions. And let's be honest, that's happened. That's happened on the boards and commissions. And then that person would, again, have to put an application. And then having said that, we have people that are putting in applications and getting denied for political reasons. Again, let's be real about it. We need people that are representative of the entire city of Bastrop. I agree with Cecilia that someone that sits in a council seat can add a lot of value to any board, whether it be EDC or not, because they live the job, they know the job. Should that person stay on a board for 20 years? I'm not saying that. I don't see the harm in letting them finish out their term.
Thank you,
And the
Councilperson
only
Lee.
board that has that is
Councilperson Lee,
EDC.
thank you. Councilperson Meyer.
So I'm going to present the whole other side to that. In my opinion, we as council members, if we are assigned to something of a board, we serve as a council person for that time. However, as Sylvia said, the timing doesn't make sense. Let me just use me as an example. If I run for reelection and I'm not reelected, but I've been appointed to a board or BED, whatever it is, I don't think it's fair for me to occupy that space because I am no longer serving in that capacity. The new person who would take my place should serve in that place because that's only fair to the person that is elected. So it makes no sense to have hangovers of people that are no longer on council. And to me, it represents much more of the people who voted or chose that. So I really see no reason to continue a hangover. There's no political thing on that. I think it just makes a lot more sense and is a lot more fair.
Council, any other questions?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other discussion? Okay, council, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Naysayer is Council Member Lee. Vote passes 3-1. Okay, so those are all of the items on the consent agenda. We're now going to move to the items for individual consideration, and we're going to move to, we're going to skip forward to 11D, E, and F at the request of some audience members.
Mayor Pro Tem, I
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
remember us approving L and M. Did we approve L and M? I don't remember those being called out.
1 second. 1 second. L and M are approved by us voting on the entire consent agenda. They're not ordinances.
But I don't remember us saying we were voting on the ones that weren't called out. Did I miss that? I don't remember us voting on the other ones.
Yeah, we voted on all of them, yes.
Along with the ones that were called out, the ordinances.
Yes.
I didn't mark off L and M for the meeting minutes. I don't
Right.
remember you reading that one out.
No, she didn't read that one out. She's not required to read that one out because it's not an
I
ordinance.
get that, but I
Right.
don't remember us saying we were voting on L, M, and whatever was left.
Right.
Maybe I just
Yeah,
missed it.
you missed it, yeah. Okay, so now, on to item,
So Mayor Pro Tem, the Assistant City Secretary says she did not read L and M.
no, I know that. She doesn't need to because they're not ordinances.
She didn't read them, but I don't
Oh,
think she.
you considered it
yeah.
included in the consent?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a consent agenda item, right. No, I'm aware that was not read. We are reading only the captions of the ordinances, and then the remainder is passed as part of the consent agenda. Okay, so now, on to item 11D. Consider an act on the first reading of ordinance 2025-14, apportioning the costs of certain improvements to property in and for the Valverde Public Improvement District Area Number 1, fixing a charge and lien against all properties within the district and the owners thereof, providing for the manner and method of collection of such assessments, making a finding of special benefit to property in the district and the real and true owners thereof, approving a service and assessment plan, and move to include on the March 11th, 2025 consent agenda for a second reading.
Mayor and Council, the Valverde subdivision has been on many agendas, if you've seen. We have finally reached what I believe is a decent agreement among all of the parties interested, and staff is ready to make a recommendation to approve. We do have folks from P3 Works who would be administering. We have attorneys to both sides here, bond attorneys, so anybody's available for questions. We will rehear this on March the 25th as part of a public hearing process that This will then be noticed in the paper. So staff is ready to recommend approval. The attorney said the 25th.
Now, the item, this item would still come back on March 11th, is that right? But we would have a public hearing on the 25th?
Correct, on the 25th, correct.
Right, but this item is on March 11th?
Correct.
And we would have a separate independent public
A
hearing on the 25th?
public hearing on the 25th, yes.
Got it.
And so for the audience, this is a public improvement district. This is a creation of a district that is apportioning infrastructure costs that'll then be assessed per single-family residence in the district, per property owner. This is not like the Hunters Crossing Public Improvement District. This does not have maintenance costs associated with it. This is simply the infrastructure cost.
And so the point there is that the PID board cannot choose to take on projects and then
Correct.
charge the cost of those projects to the residents?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, council, do y'all have any other questions on 11D?
I just have one quick one on the maintenance. So then, I'm assuming then for maintenance, there will be an HOA. But how is that determined? How is an HOA determined? Is
That
that,
is
is
at
that
the
kind of an
developer's.
automatic thing now? There's always an HOA?
Not necessarily. It's at the developer's discretion, and there's rules in, Stanley can speak more to, but the Hunters Crossing PID had things that really should have been apportioned to an HOA in a PID.
So are we aware of whether or not there's going to be an HOA?
I am not aware, but
And if there is no HOA, then
Developers
who's
here
responsible
too.
for maintenance?
developers here to answer those questions.
I'm Mayor Pro Tem Council Ryan Gray with J.R. Horton. Yes, there is an HOA, and they are responsible for all the things that are HOA owned and maintained. So the PID doesn't really maintain things like it did at Hunters Crossing. It's either city-owned or it's maintained by the HOA.
Thank you.
I just wondered if there was no HOA, then what happens to the maintenance in that scenario?
So if there was no, so there are things in the neighborhood like parks and green spaces and those kinds of things that the HOA is maintaining, all of the open spaces in particular. If those would have been dedicated to the city would have had to maintain those.
Let's return back to our agenda item. I mean, questions about a theoretical lack of HOA, which doesn't cover this place. Do you have any questions about this item? Okay, cool. So, council, motion for this item?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Councilperson Plunkett and Councilperson Meyer. Are there any other discussion on this item? Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, item passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to item 11E. Consider an act on resolution R2523, determining costs of the proposed public improvements in the Valverde Public Improvement District, approving a proposed assessment role for the improvement area number 1, and making related findings and determinations in accordance with Chapter 372 of the Texas Local Government Code. Madam City Manager.
The legal speak to this is we have reviewed the cost that they have stated for infrastructure. We believe the cost to be in line. Those costs will be proportioned out among the residents in that specific district. All of the attorneys have reviewed, P3 Works has reviewed. We believe the assessment is in line and not overburdensome to the property.
Okay, any questions?
Move to approve.
Councilperson Plunkett, Councilperson Meyer. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay. Item 11F, consider an act on resolution R2522 approving the form and authorizing the distribution of a preliminary limited offering memorandum for City of Bastrop, Texas Special Assessment Revenue Bond Series 2025 Valverde Public Improvement District.
So this is the bonds that get sold to pay for said infrastructure. The PID has place number 1 on a lien. So it's really important for them to get through all of this process before they can complete closing. I know they have several property owners already ready to get to the closing table, but they need to get through this process.
Councilperson Lee, you have a question?
Yes, so the only question I have on this one is on the first time that we had this on an agenda packet, there were many amounts there. $11,939 to fund the public improvements, and then a value of $191. Are those numbers the same? I just wonder why they weren't included so that we would know what.
I'm not
amounts
sure.
are.
Our carryover, we've been carrying this over. We may have dropped some.
Yeah, it wasn't in the last one either, because it's been on
Yes,
3.
please address.
This is the 3rd one, so I just want to make sure those numbers are the same.
Rob Hayslip, P3 Works, we're the city's bid administrator. Based on the current projections, the total cost of the improvements is $21,262,504. And right now, we're projecting a bond par of $11,939,000.
Okay, that's the same.
And a per-house assessment of approximately,
There are a couple different lot types, but approximately about $20,000 of assessment per house.
20,000 per house.
Based on lot square footage, I assume, would be the detail.
Yes, sir. As the lot is larger, the assessment gets slightly bigger.
Madam City Manager, I had asked you, I'm sorry, Councilperson Lee, are you?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had asked a question about this, and I don't even remember the exact wording I used, but you assured me that the taxpayers weren't really on the hook for this bond in some way. Do you recall that?
correct. Well, the bonds are sold on the faith and good credit of the City of Bastrop, that we did our due diligence, that we reviewed the infrastructure. They're not installing, paper straws for pipes in the ground, and that the value as stated, and the residences that will be built can sustain a $20,000 assessment. We've asked those questions. We feel confident. P3 is our person. We feel confident. The bond people, when they go to talk and sell the bonds, they will ask same said questions. And so it's $20,000 over a typical life of a 30-year mortgage.
Okay. Council, any other questions? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Councilperson Meyer and Councilperson Plunkett. Any other discussion?
Yes, one more question for you guys, because that number was 15,450, so it went up on our initial packet. It was 15,450 three council meetings ago.
Which number is that? The total improvements?
No, yeah, over the 30 years. It was initially 15,450.
I would need to look into that. I don't have that answer right now.
Rick Rosenberg with DPFG Consultants to the Developer. There are multiple lot types that each have their own assessment amount. That amount, they haven't changed.
For improvement area 1, it's said over the next 30 years, 15,450. So you're saying...
For the smallest lot. As the lots get bigger, the actual assessments are bigger. So it's not $20,000 for every lot. So it varies by the width of the lot, determines the assessment amount.
So you're saying the average is 20,000?
Roughly, but no one exactly has a 20,000.
Yeah, there's not a 20,000 lot, but when you add them all up and average them, it's roughly 20,000.
Correct. So the final numbers would be finalized during the bond pricing. I do have right now the projected numbers I can read out for y'all.
No. Thank you.
Yeah, the numbers, Councilmember, the numbers have not changed, because if they would, we would have had to gone back to the drawing board with the accountants and the lawyers.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to approve this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, item passes unanimously. We're going to go to item 11B. 11A is an item that Ms. Foster is also going to recuse herself on, so we're going to do B and C and then recuse Ms. Foster. 11B, consider and act on Resolution 2025-52 authorizing the reallocation of funding for the Blakey Lane extension.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So Blakey Lane is at 100% design. We had a GLO MIT-MOD grant, which is a CDBG grant of $2.3 million. BEDC had funded $1 million, of which $225,000 or so has already been spent. Our opinion of probable cost is $9.5 million, which leaves us about a $6.2 million shortfall. In addition to Blakey, Vista Puente, which is the road on 71 as you're looking to the right off of 21, the road that we see carved out there is also in need in this area. So staff went out for a borrow in late 22. It's called Bond Series 2023. That has a $3 million each for Gills Branch improvements as part of a quote-unquote master drainage plan, and it has $3 million for a riverbank stabilization grant. The scary thing about that is the city went out for a borrow before even receiving the grant. So we've borrowed money a couple of years ago that's been sitting there, and the grants have been denied twice already. I'm asking for the council to reallocate that $6 million to Blakey Lane with a 3.3 potential shortfall that can be funded by transportation impact fees that have been approved, and also at build out the improvements in that area, including Pearl River and Burleson, will the sales tax in that will also contribute to the ability for the street fund to sustain, the general fund portion of the street fund, to sustain that improvement. The reallocation of $2.3 million you'll see in an agenda item tonight is to complete Vista Puente Drive. And so we're just moving that money over. That is an agreement that we're finishing out with Valverde, where they would actually help us construct Vista Puente for that amount. So we would end up with Blakey and Vista Puente with $3.3 million that I've got to find from transportation impact fees and sales and property tax.
Any questions on this item, Council? Councilperson Lee?
Thank you. So I understand it needs to be done. I get it. The $6 million that we've been waiting on for Gills Branch is needed as well. I mean, that's been a long-going battle and issue with flooding. We never know when flooding is going to occur. Have we not been able to use that money to fix any portion of Gills Branch? The $6 million? What's the total cost? I can't remember what the total cost for Gills Branch was going to be.
I don't have the total cost.
It was over 20.
So here's the thing about Gills Branch. So we have the opinion of probable cost from Half and Associates in that master drainage plan that made up that $100 million plus. There was a lot of lack of maintenance that occurred during that last section of flooding, and the city has been really good about maintaining. If you ask any of the residents along the area, they'll tell you it's not prone to flooding. And so when we had the conversation about the master drainage plan, we had that conversation that if we put all 100+ million in, how many homes would actually be saved? And the answer was 0. And so we have to take a really good look as to, is that the best way to spend those dollars? Riverbank stabilization, yes, that we're losing more and more, it's sloughing off. It just has not ranked very high in the grant application process. We'll continue to do it, but my point about this is we have money that we've borrowed that's sitting there that we're losing every single, that I don't have $6 million total in there anymore because I've lost some to the payments I've had to make for it. So
Well, that's why I was wondering if we can still do any upgrades to Gills Branch with, I mean, that's $6 million. That's a lot of money. What
it's
can we
$3
do?
million for Gills Branch and it's $3 million for Riverbank stabilization.
And you gotta kind of do both at the same time for the problem to be resolved.
Well, considering that Gills Branch is in the $20 million plus range, I'm not sure how much $3 million would do.
Right.
So it is.
No, I mean to fix the overall problem, you can't do one without doing the other.
Oh, yeah, no.
Right.
No.
And then the bond, or when we receive bonds, are we required to only use those bonds for what we receive them for? So
Yes.
if that is the case, how are you able to
This
use them for-
specific action. I can't myself. You have a city manager in a neighboring city who just lost a job recently for that. You cannot use anything for other than what you said you were going to use it for. Council has to be aware of the action. Council has to be aware of the funding source, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, but there's no bank stipulation, when you do a loan, you have to only.
Well, there is a stipulation. These are guaranteed with general funds.
No. What I'm saying is, council can say, yeah, you can move the funds, but it doesn't require, there's no stipulation with
No.
the lender
No.
saying you can only use, like a grant, you can only use
No.
it for this, this specific thing. Okay, great. All right, those are my questions.
And the other super important thing I want council to really understand, because as we talk about the street fund and we go into the budget, is there's two components to the street fund, right? There's the street tax portion, and then there's the general fund portion. This is general fund money, so just be aware.
Council, any more questions? Motion,
Move to approve.
Second.
Plunkett and Meyer. Any other discussion, council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. 11C, A and B. Consider an act on Resolution 2025-49 authorizing the city manager to enter into a sports license agreement for the use. Consider on Resolution 2025-50 authorizing the city manager to enter into a sports license for the use of the Rusty Rental Fields by Bastrop Youth Baseball and Softball Organization.
After some pretty embattled conversations, we've reached agreement. Both parties have agreed to the schedule. It includes the use of Fireman's Park. The city does have to provide some fencing. We've got to talk about some lighting. Terry Moore and I are looking at how we can best accommodate that. The plan is not to charge the work schedules that have already been predetermined, but both groups have agreed to work out the assets, the refrigerators, the concession, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we did our best to keep the dates separate so that there would be no boxing in the concession stand.
Okay, any questions, council?
Move to approve A
Second.
and B.
So we have a motion from Councilperson Plunkett to approve A and B. That's resolutions 2025-49 and 2025-50. A second from Councilperson Meyer. Any other discussion, council? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, both of those resolutions have passed. We will now move on to 11A. Where is it? There it is. Conduct
I
a
really want to thank our consultant for sticking with us.
Conduct a public hearing, consider and act on the first reading of ordinance 2025-08, authorizing an update and amending Bastrop Code of Order, Chapter 13, Article 1312, entitled Impact Fees, updating the land use assumptions, capital improvement plan, and amending impact fees for wastewater utilities as attached in Exhibits A through C, and move to include it on the March 11, 2025 agenda for a second reading. Go.
Mayor,
Hey,
don't
before you
need
do,
need
point of order.
Extension to 10 minutes.
Move to extend the meeting until we finish this last item.
Second.
Motion from Councilperson Plunkett and seconded by Councilperson Meyer to extend the meeting until we finish this item, presumably also to adjourn. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay. Now you can speak.
Okay.
Though that is not an invitation to speak for a long, long time.
Duly noted. Now, we're just going to cover some things that we already covered already. We'll run through, stop me if there's any questions on this. The impact fees and the presentation that we, actually this was done in October of last year as well. So impact fees, the reason we're doing this, Chapter 395, Local Government Code, requires us to go through these steps. And as we went through the study, this is just a mechanism for paying for growth, for the infrastructure needed on this. When we do the impact fees, this is what it covers. Pretty much anything that's associated with the infrastructure, with the growth, is included in this. The engineering costs, construction costs, land, financing, all those components. We can't include, when we use the impact fees, we can't include any operation and maintenance, any existing infrastructure, upgrades, anything like that. Not included debt service that is not associated with the growth, can't include that in impact fees. When we go through the process, went through land use assumptions, projected growth, what's going to happen with this, built a capital plan off of that. The capital plan is associated with that. We go through a 10-year growth process when we look at a 10-year planning period on this. Chapter 395 requires you to do this every 5 years at most on this, but we do look at a 10-year planning period for doing this, and we're just projecting growth units, tying the capital program to those growth units, and then we're also including financing costs in there. So if we're issuing debt, we're allowed to include financing costs in the impact fee calculation as well. We also have to look at a credit. We either do a revenue credit calculation. It's fairly involved in that. It looks at what you've got already in your existing customer rates, the debt associated with that from prior growth and infrastructure there, or we just go ahead and take 50% of the capital program. Chapter 395 allows us to do either one of those. What we're trying to do from here is develop the maximum allowable impact fee that you can charge for this. What we did in the process, we went with a 4% growth factor for the 10-year period. We looked at the water and the land use assumptions capital program. Don't need a change on that. It's sufficient the way it is. We recommend to just leave that there. So we looked at the wastewater alone. For the next 10 years, we're projecting almost 3,600 new wastewater customers. In the capital program, 37 wastewater projects included in that. The big part that you have to decide on this is your plan expansion. That's the big driver from a cost standpoint.
1 second.
Yes.
So, council, this is one of the decisions we need to make tonight, is the 4 versus 6.
That's exactly it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we ran scenarios just for 4 versus 6. When we're doing this, obviously we don't build necessarily just for the next 10 years, not cost efficient, doesn't work that way, but we have to look at what cost will be used in the next 10-year period. So we may build a plant, won't necessarily use all of that for the next 10-year period, so only those costs associated with the next 10 years go into the impact fee calculation. And the rest rolls through. Again, we got to do this every 5 years, so we catch up as we move forward. You can see on these, for the 4 MGD plant, we've got wastewater treatment, we've got pumping, your collection lines, and then the study cost. Between the 6 MGD and the 4 MGD, the only thing that changes is your wastewater treatment, the cost of that. Your total project cost for the 4 MGD plant, the wastewater treatment is $267.5. Then on the 6 MGD plant, it goes to $332,174. So what that means from an impact fee eligible for the next 10-year period, on the 4 MGD plant expansion, your capital costs are a little over $52 million on the 4 MGD and $52.9 on the 6 MGD. So not a lot of change, a little bit of change between the two. Again, because we're looking at costs associated with the next 10 years.
So that's the cost that's eligible to be paid for with these impact fees, right?
Yes, sir, that's exactly right.
But the actual cost going from $300 million to $366 million is a big deal.
That is a big deal. That is a big deal.
Even $300 million by itself is a big deal. Okay.
See why I'm standing? I can't even look at it.
So what that does do for us, though, if you look on the right-hand side, we've got a comparison between the 4 MGD and the 6 MGD. And again, Mr. Mayor, as you pointed out, for this, we were just looking at the impact fee portion of it. But there is a difference. And again, that is a decision to make between what size plant you go for. As we go through, we've got the recoverable costs that carried over from the last slide, the $52.3 million versus the $52.9 million. We've added the financing costs associated with each of those. We backed out because there will be interest earnings. You will be holding money as you're waiting to spend it for infrastructure costs. So there will be interest earnings there. You have some existing fund balance. So that gives us a recoverable amount there of the 60.9 for the 4 MGD and the 61.8 for the 6 MGD. Now, we took that 3582, that's the number of units we expect to add new customers over the 10-year period. gave us a maximum allowable for the 4 MGD plant. Your maximum allowable wastewater impact fee would be 17,006 for the 4 and 17,251 for the 6. As I mentioned, though, we have to apply credit to it. So basically what we did on this is we just cut the infrastructure cost in half. So we cut that cost in half so your impact fee, maximum allowable impact fee would be $85.03 for the 4 MGD and $86.25 for the 6 MGD.
Now, these service units, the 3582, those are, if I remember from historical, similar, same presentations, those are only the ones that are actively planned as of right now? That's not theoretical growth, that's, those are development agreements?
Correct.
Right.
Does that include Valverde PID?
Correct.
It does?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so then it will be bigger than this, and it's not actually just 3582. This is what the law lets us set it at.
And we'll revisit this.
Yeah, which is why we revisit it every
Yeah.
couple of years to
Right.
deal with the actual changes. Yeah,
At the
got it.
pace that y'all are changing, and the construction costs, the way it's increasing too. That's what's driving a lot of, 5 years is way too long. So
How do we, if we choose 4 versus 6, does that constrain us in the future when we choose to build 4 versus 6? Or can we choose 6 now and choose 4 then?
My recommendation is we go to 6. We have such a large wastewater CCN, we have such a large service area that we're just now beginning to get our hands around lot size minimums, which may, begin to lower that a little bit. But with the onset of MUDs as they're coming in through the county and they need a service provider and they're in our CCN anyway, it doesn't make any sense for us to go to a 4 having to be back here in a shorter period of time.
And I'll buy that. I guess the thing that the knowledge that I lack is how many, what's the multiplier for a service unit to turn into, gallons per day?
What is the multiplier for service unit
Right,
to
so,
turn into
if
gallons
we've
per
got
day?
3582 known, active, planned, and then even though we're not allowed to for the sake of calculating this, we can estimate our yearly growth has been X in service units, so let's pretend like it's going to be the same over the course of a period of time. Then we can add those up over 10 years and know how many service units we'll have, what the capacity requirement is for a service unit, arithmetic, and then know how many million gallons we need in that, flawed model, but at least, with an envelope or so, you could calculate, do we need 4, do we need 6, or do we need 1? And this is over. And I'm not saying that I believe that. I'm just saying that,
We've done a back of the envelope calculation, and the belief is that we're going to need 10 by 2030.
Okay.
So 6 plus the 2 that we have, that's 8, plus the 1.5 we're putting back into service into 1 and 2.
Okay.
So we're going to have our field trip on Friday to the wastewater treatment plant.
I still would like a workshop on this topic, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right, we owe you that. And, I continue to say that we need to monetize our plant. That's the only way we're going to eat that elephant. That is a humongous number that will never, your
No, the
grandkids'
humongous number is
grandkids
not
will
even
still be
on
paying
this
it.
one. The humongous number was the 300 million one.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, but these are, when you think about that the between the water and sewer borrow right now, 100 billion plus
Yeah.
those are really large and hairy, scary numbers.
No, this is a critical, important decision, and I don't say that meaning critical, important decision, so let's move forward. I mean, on this thing, yes, but on the wastewater treatment plants, the timing, the financing, the type of plant, the cost of the plant, the expandability of it, those things are going to make a difference for Bastrop, good, bad, or otherwise, for decades.
And to your point and your question, Mr. Mayor, on earlier, you can't You can't vote for one and build the other.
Okay, so we're constraining our future
It has to
decision.
be in the capital program for you to have that impact fee.
Okay,
Could we,
hold on. Councilperson Lee, you have your light on. Would you like to ask a
I
question?
do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't know who this is for, and I don't even know if I'm going to intelligently ask it. But I know that, so I looked at wastewater treatment plants that are new to Central Texas and different areas to compare the impact fees. And you keep saying we went to the maximum allowable. Every other city they have larger population, they have more construction going on, they're lower than us. So why are we going with the maximum? Because my concern is, of course, this is gonna hit the residents ultimately, right?
Sure.
Again, housing is out of control in Bastrop right now, and that's who's gonna end up paying for this. So how can we mitigate that? We may not be able to mitigate it, but why are we going to the maximum with cities bigger than us? Or
Your actual maximum allowable is closer to that 17,000. So you're already putting half of it onto your ratepayers, just because we did the 50% calculation. So we cut the capital program in half, which means we're already moving 50% of those costs to the ratepayers. So the maximum allowable here that's calculated is already half of what's going to be required. The other cities,
with more population, more growth.
we don't know where, when I do know, because I did these for MBU, theirs is much higher. They went 100% of it. There's no telling without actually asking them on these other cities, what did you vote for? What the number is not necessarily the maximum. They may have voted for 20% or 40%. There's no telling. When we provide the maximum allowable, you just can't go higher than that. You can go lower. You can go anywhere below that you want, but whatever you don't include in this, the ratepayers have to cover. It's a zero-sum game.
And the maximum allowable, making it that high is for us to be able to pay off the cost of the wastewater treatment plant?
That maximum allowable is just that. It's just what the true cost is.
Yeah.
And that number is what your developers or your new customers, it's ultimately goes to be your new customers, is what your new customers would have to pay for, but that's the cost that they're creating on the system.
And that's my last question is, would the cost, because it's high compared to the other 5 or 6 cities that I looked at. Would that in any way deter developers from wanting to build because of the cost that it's so high?
It is passed, they're going to pass the cost along. They're going to build to your new residents. 3 times I've done these, and the cities have stopped and said, we'd like to do an economic analysis and find out how much that's going to deter growth. None of those 3 were able. One of them just stopped because nobody would agree to do the study for them. The other 2 stopped because they couldn't figure out how to do it. It's never shown that this deters growth at all. Economic, your environment, what's going on in the country, that can deter growth. These don't stop it. People are gonna come. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Plunkett.
yeah, it's not about whether, in this case, the problem is it's the ratepayers who are going to pay regardless. It's what share is paid by the new residents, who are creating the impact on the system, and what share is paid by the current residents who are here, because it's all got to be paid by
someone.
Exactly, and it's going to be paid by people who live here.
And keep in mind, this is a one-time cost, so your new customers coming in are going to pay this, and then they're going to be your ratepayers too. So they're going to cover that additional 50%.
Councilperson Lee, do you have another question?
I have one more question, and this might be to Sylvia. So some of the cities that I looked at had rate areas. So there was a different, kind of like what we did with the transportation impact fee. But they had different rate areas so that we're building more west. That's our prime real estate right now. So yeah, you're going to pay a higher wastewater impact fee this way. But east would be cheaper because we don't have as much room to grow east or north. Would that be beneficial for us at all to establish rate areas based on where the growth is going?
Right now, it was all planned to go to the new plant. It's only been recently that we've talked about rehabilitating the old plant. So I don't know that, we have a transfer lift station project that's also a different story that was gonna send all the flows, remember, to the new plant. So I don't think our area is so big that
We need to separate
no.
areas. Okay, thank you.
Now I have a piece of chocolate in my mouth. Okay, council, we've heard this. We've asked our questions. Is there a well, hold on. I have to call for a public hearing. Public hearing is open. Do we have anyone signed up for the public hearing? Well, then at 10:17, I'm going to close said public hearing. So, council, we've asked our questions. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
At the 6 million.
The 6 MGD.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilperson Lee, a second from Councilperson Plunkett to approve the fee at the 6 million gallon per day plant. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, the motion passes unanimously with Carrie Fossler stepping out of the room.
Mayor, could I make, I'm sorry, I was doing the math while you were speaking. Just for information and edification, one house, one average house with 4 people generates about 400 gallons a day. 400, that's an average house. If you work from home, if you're doing other things in your home, it's going to increase. So 400 times 3582, that's 1.5 million gallons a day already, just the new stuff. Not counting what we have, not counting what we're going to take from Elon, not counting anything else. So if you think about it, if you say that out loud and you say our current plant has 2 million gallon capacity, and we're already sending 500 million there, if all of those were to come online tomorrow, I'd be in super trouble because the government says I needed to have been planning a long time ago. We've given capacity on the old plant, right? We're about to open up that million capacity. So we've bought ourselves some time, but it's not an inordinate amount of time. And what we'll be talking about on Friday as we talk about this and the wastewater plant is there are other financing mechanisms too. We're not going into this alone because we can't.
Well, council, we have just gotten completely through an 8-page agenda. I want to thank you because that was a marathon. We are now on to item 12, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
It was 121 slides.
Councilperson Lee and Councilperson Plunkett, we are now adjourned. Thank you, Bastrop.